Good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock, and this is the Swanee River Water Management District Governing Board meeting and public hearing. And it's December 10th, 2024. And at this time, we're calling our meeting to order. If everyone would rise for invocation and pledge. Mr. Keith, would you do the honors?
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, Lord. We thank you for your many blessings, and most of all, the blessings of your Son. Father, in this season, we never want to forget the sacrifice that was made for an unworthy people. Father, we pray that your presence will be in this meeting to lead and guide. Give us ideas and thoughts that will better protect the natural resources. I pray for the staff and this board, their families, everyone here within the sound of my voice. Have a blessed and kind holiday, and forever keep your Son at the forefront. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
The little bookkeeping, the meeting is available in person by district's YouTube link, www.myswaneriver.com. And this time we'll do roll call. Here.
Here. Here. Here.
Sessions.
Here.
Mr. Thompson. Mr. Lloyd.
Here.
Mr. Wheeler.
Here.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Robin. Are there any amendments to our agenda?
No amendments or updates to the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. At this time, we'll open the floor to public comment. Jeffrey, would you like to speak at this time?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning,
Morning.
ladies and gentlemen of the board. I just noticed we have a new board member. I want to introduce myself. I'm Jeffrey Hill. I'm the man who was fined $100,000 for replacing a rusted pipe, although replacing a rusted pipe is not against the law. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Mr. Bauer, would you like to wait until the cost share? Well, come on up. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Mace Bauer with 83 Farms in Gilchrist County. On agenda item 12, really just wanted to thank you for previous support. We met a cap. I think it was a $500,000 cap. It kind of treated as a marathon and not a sprint, and that's been about 7 or 8 years in the making to get to that cap. Still have some goals. You know, we have about 180 irrigation systems that we farm. This money that we were looking for goes to a base station, a central controller where we can control on and off decisions, you know, from a computer or by phone. Just kind of say from a boots on the ground. If I've seen it once, I've seen it 100 times where a system might be a 30-minute drive away and a 30-minute drive back, and you knew it rained, and you can make a decision, you know, let's shut it off. Where, you know, that may not happen at 6:30, 7, 8 o'clock at night. You might not want to make that trip, you know, and so we see the benefits of it. Kind of take some support. We kind of take $100,000 bite at it every year and get 75,000 back, and we'd like to keep doing that. It was proposed to us to look at a larger, I guess you'd call it a grant through the DEP. And, you know, through my career, been involved with that. And, you know, that's sort of a 2 or 3 year down the road, I think. And we don't want to stop what we're doing now in hopes that, you know, that comes available in the future. So just appreciate your support as you consider that today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for feeding us. All right. At this time, is there any other public comment? If not, we'll close public comment, move on to our consent agenda. Everyone has had a chance to read everything, and I think, let's see, Mr. Lloyd, do you have
Madam
a?
Chair, I'll not be voting on the consent agenda. Items 10 and 11 refer to Alliance Dairies and Alliance Branford, which are sibling organizations to Swanee Valley Feeds.
Okay, thank you.
And my paperwork into Ms. Robin.
Perfect. Keep after me, Miss Robin. All right, do I have a motion for our consent agenda?
I'll make that motion, Madam Chair.
Second.
And a second, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign, motion carried. The next item is our hydrologic conditions report.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'd like to present the hydrologic conditions report for November 2024. This year is getting away from us, isn't it? I'd like to thank Stephanie Armstrong. She sent me this great photo of Telford Spring over in the Middle Swanee. It's one of my favorite springs. About 18 years ago, almost 18 years ago when I first started, this was one of the first springs that I saw in the district. And I was really mesmerized by the color change between the river and the spring itself. You can't really see it in this photo, unfortunately, but it is typically, let's see if I can, typically it's right in this area, that kind of interface. And I thought that was one of the coolest things I had seen. So Telford Spring is one of my favorite springs, I think, in the district. And I think it's a great photo. I want to thank Stephanie for sending this over to me. I think it's a great way to start our November 2024 hydrologic conditions report. Rainfall for November 2024, we had a district-wide average of 1.3 inches, which represents about 46% less than that long-term average of 2.4 inches. I want to mention we had a surplus at the end of October of around 7 inches, just a little bit over 7 inches. As we move that time period forward and pick up this district-wide average of 1.3 inches this month, that got reduced slightly to only 5.1 inches of rainfall surplus. Looking at the map here, I wanted to mention, just looking at this, the rainfall is kind of skewed this month, really. If you look, most of the rain occurred over in the western part of our district. We did get some higher amounts here in Dixie County and Gilchrist County, but for the most part, our district got less than an inch in a lot of the counties. Higher than the average amount. That average amount is included in that 1 to 2 inch range here in blue. 2 to 3 inches in green, 3 to 4 inches in orange. We had a 4 to 5 inch range up in Madison and Jefferson counties as well, even down into Taylor County. We had some spots more than 5 inches, kind of basically really just up in Jefferson and Madison counties as well. So like I said, it's kind of skewed this month, but as far as rainfall goes, that's kind of what we got in November. Our biggest rainfall maker for the month was just a single day on the 6th of November. What happened during that time, there was a little Gulf, I guess a little system that came through, and it dumped some water up here, dumped some rain up here in Jefferson, Madison, and Taylor counties. And then it made its way up to Valdosta, where I think it was around 10 inches or so within a 24-hour period, which was reflected in some of our river levels and flows, which we'll go into just a little bit later. From that time period. But we also did get some higher amounts down in Dixie County and Gilchrist County. Dixie County and Gilchrist both seeing upwards of 2 to 2.5 inches in that red color there. But for the most part, the district's still kind of showing less than half an inch for that rainfall amount during that time period. I did want to mention too that it was almost half an inch that we got as a district-wide average, which is almost close to about 40% of what we got for the month from this single day. With that said, though, with the lack of rainfall that we've experienced lately, we are seeing some deficits in our district. This is from the 9th of November to the 8th of December. We are seeing anywhere from 1 to 2 inches of rainfall deficit in most of our district, over in the western part, central part, and even over to the east. But as you go north and south in our district, Hamilton County, even all the way down into Gilchrist and Levy counties, we're seeing 2 to 3 inches, and that's in that darker orange color, of rainfall deficits currently, as the past 30-day window shows. As I mentioned earlier, stream flow conditions for November 2024, really kind of high in certain spots to begin the month. October, we got a little bit of rain there toward the end that kind of helped boost up the flows in our rivers. Most of our rivers began and ended the month in one of the 3 categories. Normal, the 25th to 75th percentile, above normal, 75th to 90th, or high, greater than 90th percentile. The Osceola Lamont, Alapahat Jennings, and even down into Rock Bluff on the Swanee all ended the month in the high, and that's due to that water coming down from Valdosta and that big rain event that they had up there from that time period. We had some above normal ending the months as well, 75th and 90th percentile, and those include Ellaville on the Swanee, Branford on the Swanee, up at the Withlacoochee Panetta, and even in the South Georgia, Withlacoochee at Quitman, Alapaha, Statenville, Little River, and then up at the Alapaha as well. And then finally, we had a lot of rivers that ended, a lot of river gauges that ended in the normal, that 25th to 75th percentile. Econfina, Finn Holloway, Steinhatchee, over at the Fort White gauge, Worthington Springs, New River, Graham, even on the upper Swanee at White Springs and into Fargo in South Georgia. Really the only ones that we monitor, well, that we saw in this report rather, that were having any sort of issues was the North Prong at St. Mary's and St. Mary's at McClinney. They were kind of showing some of the lower percentiles of flow for this past month. This is the upper Florida and aquifer levels. This was the end of October. I wanted to just show this as a comparison for what we got this month. What we were seeing during October was a bunch of high wells stretching from Jefferson County into Suwannee County, down into Columbia County and Lafayette County, and that's above 90th percentile in that dark blue. And that's on top of the 75th to 90th. So we had some higher well levels down in the south too, Taylor County, Dixie County, Levy County, stretching over into the eastern part of our district and up in the north as well. Fast forward 1 month, we see a contraction of that. We're kind of seeing a lot of those high well levels replaced by the normal well levels, like the 25th to 75th percentiles. And that's reflected over here from southern Jefferson County down into Taylor County, Dixie County, and Levy County. They're all in that normal range currently. We did still have an area stretching into Suwannee County from Madison County down into Columbia and just a little bit of Lafayette of that above 90th percentile still, but that's mainly confined to the northern part of our district. And then we had some areas up north and over to the east, and just a few wells over here, a handful of wells over in Dixie County, Gilchrist County, and Levy County that were still showing that 75th to 90th. But all in all, for November, the well levels look really good for groundwater. U.S. Drought Monitor, as you would probably guess, with the lack of rain, we haven't had a whole lot. So we're seeing a lot of abnormally dry in our district, that D0 designation, for the most part in our district. But as you go east, we're starting to see some counties, Columbia, Baker, Union, and Bradford counties that actually have that moderate drought designation, that D1 designation. That's just due to the fact that we haven't gotten a whole lot of rain, especially since the beginning of December. But this was released last Thursday. I expect for the new one that comes out this Thursday to potentially get some more moderate drought in our district. I did want to mention, I know it seems like a kind of a broken record a little bit, but we are expecting the La Nina to actually take over. It right now, it's the percentile, or the percent has gone down. It's been 57% sometime by the end of this month. And that once that La Nina hits us, that's going to take us into the new year from January through March. With that said, I know it's not officially here yet, but National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's seasonal outlook for December through February actually shows us with below normal rainfall. Most of the southern United States is seeing that as well. And then above normal temperature probabilities included in that, two of which are the characteristics of a La Nina. I know it's like I said, it's not official yet, but they're already kind of saying, yeah, looks like we may get there. All right, so November 30th was the official last day of the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. Yay. I wanted to mention some stats on this. We had, so they predicted 17 to 24 named storms. We had 18 total. That got us down through Sarah. Sarah was the last one named. I think that was the only one named since the previous board meeting. We also had 8 to 13 hurricanes. We actually ended up with 11 hurricanes total, and major hurricanes 4 to 7, we ended up with 5. And I thought this was an interesting look here. It's still preliminary data, but these are the tracks of the named storms. What really stood out at me was right here in the Gulf and then the Caribbean just hammered this past year, as opposed to what in the open Atlantic. So I thought that was a very interesting look for this past year for the hurricane season. All right, finally, our November 2024 summary, we had a rainfall amount of 1.3 inches. That's about 46% lower than that long-term average of 2.4 inches. We had a surplus, as I mentioned, at the end of October of just over 7 inches. That kind of got reduced as we moved that window of time forward. That's now hanging around 5.1 inches of rainfall surplus. Disregard upper Florida and aquifer levels fell slightly from the 82nd percentile in October. We're down to the 74th percentile at the end of November. And that's due to a median level decrease of about 7/10 of a foot across our monitored wells for this report. As I mentioned, I know it seems like I've broken record, but the La Nina is expected to, it is favored with 57% chance to actually start sometime within the, I guess, the end of the month. And once that happens, that's going to continue through the winter of 2025, which includes the month of January to March. The last U.S. drought monitor, abnormally dry conditions for much of the district, but we also had Columbia, Baker, Union, and Bradford counties designated with moderate drought. I would look for that to probably expand with this update this Wednesday, or excuse me, this Thursday. And finally, our 2024 Atlantic hurricane season, which ended on November 30th, we ended up with 18 named storms, 11 hurricanes, and 5 major hurricanes. With that, Madam Chair, I'll take any questions the board may have.
Thank you. Any questions on our report?
I have some
Go ahead.
Robbie, on the hurricane season in data, does the district have a preliminary timeline of the actual happenings down at the coast and wind speeds and everything else of what we really experienced on the coastline of Taylor County? Because why I'm preferencing this is we're having a lot of residents down there that did have homeowners insurance and flood insurance. There's a lot of back and forth between various companies saying, well, it was flood damage versus wind damage and a whole bunch of other stuff. And there's a lot of landowners and a lot of homeowners down there that could really use good scientific data, if we have it, to present to their claims adjusters and saying, listen, it's an effect of both. Do we have that data?
Sure. Mr. Schwab, we don't have that in-house, but that is handled generally by National Weather Service or NOAA or even the National Hurricane Center. I know it takes them a little bit to get that data out because they have to have QA/QC it, but once that's out, it should be available. We can definitely look to get that for you.
It would be very helpful. I think if we can make that public to our counties that are struggling with this right here, even going all the way up to Madison and Jeff, all the way up through. We're just, the first insurance company came back to our family and said that basically there was only 95-mile-an-hour winds and it was the flood that took everything out. And everybody knows that statistical data, that's not accurate. And what kind of shenanigans is the insurance companies playing when they come up with that kind of stuff when we all know something different?
Yeah.
So it would be very helpful if we could work with the National Weather Service to be able to just provide that service and go to our property appraisers and say, hey, this is what's happening. Can you get this to your people?
I have contacts at National Weather Service. I can see if that data is available now, if it's been QA'd and it's available to the public, and I will definitely get back with you on that.
You're the man, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do we have any cooperating agencies?
Madam Chair, I'm not aware of any other agencies present today. We do have representation from DEP here on a normal basis.
Okay. I think the best agency today is Swanee River Water Management
Absolutely.
staff. Yep. I'm good with that one.
We got a good representation of them.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. All righty, let's see. Mr. Reeves.
No, ma'am, I don't have anything unless there are questions of me.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Reeves? All right, we'll go on to our facilities update.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the board, those in attendance, good morning. Always a pleasure to see each of you. For business and community services, you will find items number 9 through 19 on this morning's agenda. Many of these items were approved by way of consent agenda, so thank you for doing that. We will start this morning with item number 9, a facilities update, and we'll ask Mr. Ben Glass to come forward and give that. And following Ben, Kristen Thompson, our district finance program manager, will come up and present the FY 25-26 prelim budget. I do want to just say that our finance staff continues to work one position down. They are extremely busy and they're still putting out a high quality product. So I appreciate the work that they do. And then items number 15 and 17 are informational items. Leroy is out of town, but we do have Mary Diaz here if you have any questions on those. Ben?
Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just a quick update on facilities for you this morning. We do have a tentative start date. If nothing goes wrong, they'll begin tear down on the roof on January 6th. As soon as we have that dried in, they'll start the interior work. We anticipate metal to go up on the roof on the 14th. So we've asked them to do this building over the weekend, so we shouldn't disrupt any activities over here for the board meeting in January. But otherwise, we'll have work going on for the next couple of months here at the office. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on our construction? Who ended up being the contractor for the roof?
Blue Sky is the name of the contracting company. That was who was recommended by our insurance carrier.
Okay. All right, that sounds great. Thank you.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Madam Chair, members of the board. You have before you agenda item number 14, the fiscal year 2025-2026 preliminary budget. A copy of the memo is provided to you on BCS page 28. And pursuant to Chapter 373, Section 535 of the Florida statutes, the water management districts are required to submit a standard format preliminary budget for the next fiscal year for legislative review by January the 15th of each year. The preliminary budget submitted for review is balanced by fund, properly utilizes restricted funds, and provides for expenditures as designated and defined by Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement Number 54. As you may recall, we did present an overview of the preliminary budget following last month's board meeting at the preliminary budget workshop. There have been no changes to the preliminary budget since that time. As such, staff recommends that the governing board approve the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2025 to 26 of $83,629,325 and authorize the executive director to make recommended adjustments as necessary to submit the standard format preliminary budget by January 15th, 2025 in accordance with Section 373 Florida statutes.
First, is there any questions for Kristen on the budget? All right. Is there a motion
Make that motion.
and a second?
A second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
That's it. Okay, Mr. Tim, thank you. Oh, good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. The Division of Outreach and Operations has 5 items for your consideration today within the board meeting. We also have a presentation in the workshop and then a lands committee where we have several items. But most of our items are for informational purposes, with item number 21 approved on consent. And before I address item number 23, Troy Roberts has an announcement for you for an upcoming event.
Good morning.
Madam Chair, members of the board. Since I probably will not see most of you again, I'm going to go ahead and say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Hope it's fun and filled with family and all those things that we sometimes take for granted at this time of the year. So this update is for informational purposes only, but we thought now would be a wonderful time to provide you guys with an update. And I know we've mentioned this a few times over the last 6 months, but we are currently gearing up for the 2025 Water Resource Symposium. This event is going to take place on January 28th. It's going to be hosted by Florida Gateway College and sponsored by the district. We sent out invitations last week to city, county, other government agencies that we work with, and you will be seeing quite a bit more about it over the next several weeks. Topics for this symposium are going to include flood risk awareness and mitigation, which is obviously timely based on how the last couple of years have gone. Grants, permitting rules, wetlands. We'll have speakers from obviously the district, but FEMA, FDOT, FDEM, and others. Our keynote speaker is going to be Dr. Wes Brooks, who is the state's chief resilience officer. So he will be speaking over the lunchtime break that we have. We'll also have a vendor area. The way it's going to be set up is at the college, we have a couple different venues. We're going to have the symposium itself in the library area there, and then we're going to have lunch and the vendors set up in the gymnasium conference center. So everybody, once you finish the morning part of the symposium, you'll walk over, and then if you're a government official, whoever, you can meet with the vendors that are there and the consultants to discuss any projects or plans that you may have upcoming or that you may request help on. We think this is going to be a great educational opportunity to assist our government partners. It gets a lot of people in the same place, and we know a lot of people have questions, and so if there's a lot of that same question and answer type of stuff, that's where you can get your information. And if all goes well, we hope to make this an annual event. So we expect it to go well. So hopefully we'll be starting to plan our 2026 one sometime next year. But as always, we thank you for your continued support. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer them.
Any questions for Troy? Sounds good getting everybody together. I think that'll be very beneficial.
Thank you.
And we appreciate the board's support of events like the symposium. It is one of several ongoing efforts that the district and the staff are trying to do to not only share information and education to the public, but also give them the tools that they need to help make wise decision making, comprehensive planning with the communities, and so they can be advocates for things that are important for the district as well. So we appreciate y'all's support of that.
Now, Caitlin, was this an official invitation for us, or do I need to look for my invitation in the mail?
You will all receive personalized invitations.
Okay, that'd be great. I mean, that's fine. I just was wondering. I just didn't want to be left out.
Chair.
Yes.
Consider that your save the date.
Okay, thank you. Save the
Okay,
date. Got it.
save the date.
No problem.
That's right.
No problem. Thank you so much.
You
Caitlin.
remember
I
what date that is?
Sometime in January.
28.
28. Yes. It'd be real cold, but that's okay. Appreciate it, Caitlin. I just want to make sure that I just need to be looking for whatever was coming in the mail. I like getting mail. Nice.
Agreed. Agreed. Madam Chair, members of the board, the item that we have for you today is item number 23, which is on OPS page 6. This is a request to repeal a governing board directive 11-002, proposed acquisition activity, indicated by the number of the directive. This was drafted over a decade ago and has been, when we were evaluating our directives and our governance for land management and land acquisition and reviewing the Florida statutes, we found that this directive was redundant, but mostly inconsistent with the statute, and that the statute reference 373-139 is clear regarding the noticing for land acquisition activities, which you're actually going to hear about today in the workshop that will, depending on the board's action, we will need to follow at the January meeting or ahead of the January meeting. So just to give you an overview of what this directive does and the statute that it intends to clarify that staff think does not need clarification, is it outlines notification to counties, local county bodies for land acquisition activities. However, 373-139 clearly explains the noticing requirements, which are associated with the 5-year work plan. Again, you're going to hear about that in our Lands Committee this afternoon, and the statute specifies a time frame associated with that noticing, which is not listed in the directive, and it specifies how we should contact the counties and the public associated with land acquisition activities. So again, in an effort to streamline our governance and reduce duplicity in the program, We ask that the board repeal this directive in light of its inconsistency with the statute and the fact that the statute itself is clear.
Any questions? This item, is there a motion?
Ma-
Oh,
Madam
sorry.
Chair, if I could, if the board would like to review this over time, we can table this and bring it back up in January for consideration as well. But that is at the board's discretion.
You've done your homework and feel like that this is kind of cleaning up the directive so that it is streamlined and doesn't duplicate what is required by Florida statutes. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll make the motion to proceed.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes our items for the Division of Outreach and Operations.
Thank you, ma'am. Hi, Dr. Brown.
Good morning, Madam Chair. We're moving more solidly towards good morning at this point.
We are.
The Water Resources Division has 4 items for your consideration. Thank you for approving items 26 and 27 by way of the consent agenda. I'm excited to introduce a new staff member for the Water Resources Division, Mitch Valerio. Mitch, if you could stand up. So Mitch joined the district in November 2024 and works with the district's hydrologic database. So he is going to be working with Susie and with Robbie to ensure the quality of our data. Prior to working with the district, Mitch worked both in data collection and quality assurance with regional and statewide hydrologic monitoring networks. Mitch was most recently employed with the St. Johns River Water Management District as a data quality assurance specialist and a water resource data manager. And prior to that, with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources as an environmental specialist. Mitch earned a bachelor's degree in environmental science from the Ohio State University and a master's degree in environmental science from University of Idaho. When not working, Mitch prefers to be outside doing things like yard work, gardening, hiking, kayaking, and digging up the yard with his 2 boys. We're very happy to have him here and working with the data that we have at the district.
Awesome. Thank you and welcome.
Welcome.
Mitch, we're so glad that you finally decided to come to work for the 5th largest water management district. in the
That's
state of
right.
Florida. You bet. Water management district, and you just forget that past in St. John's. I mean, it's a dark chapter in your life, and we're so glad you're here.
Right, with that, I will switch over to Ms. Susie Hetrick, who will be presenting item number 28, an update on the surface water improvement plan, unless there are questions for me.
Any questions from Dr. Brown? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Miss Susie.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Earlier than usual, you're bringing up the rear. Okay, good morning. This morning I have a quick update for you on the status of the district's coastal river swim plan. Just want to keep it in front of you because it will be in front of the public very soon. We're preparing to send the draft plan update to the stakeholder agencies and local governments for their review and comments. Just as a reminder, the coastal river swim plan area is shown on this map. It includes the Osceola and Wassissa, the Econfina, Finn-Holloway, Steinhatchee, and Wakasasa rivers. The district's current swim plans are available online through the myswanneeriver.com homepage by clicking on the Science and Data tab. If I can do this at the top, and then going to the Plans and Reports link, which will take you to this menu, and you scroll down to Surface Water Improvement Plans. When we have the draft Coastal Rivers update, it will be posted there at that link, and we will issue a press release when it's posted. And looking forward, once we have posted the plan and requested stakeholder review, there will be a 60-day comment period as required in the swim rule. We'll review the comments and revise the plan as needed, and then we'll come back and hold a public workshop here at the district to present the revised draft. And then we'll bring the final draft to the governing board to request your approval. And once we have the approved plan, we will send that to DEP for a final 30-day review, and then we will bring that back for formal adoption. And that concludes my update. Just wanted to keep it in front of you since everything is kind of busy right now and lots of things are going on.
That's quite a process. Yes, ma'am. When is it due in Tallahassee?
It's not due at any specific time to my knowledge. They mostly were working on the timeframes that are outlined in the swim rule for 60 days and then 30 days.
Gotcha. All right. Any questions?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I see that you're monitoring and putting the plan together for the Finn Holloway River, and I'm just curious, with in the last year, the paper mill not putting their effluent in the river anymore, are we seeing anything different as far as environmental quality or even river flows or anything with that right there? And it's really, that area is really dear to my heart because of, I do a lot of fishing in there along the coast. And I was just wondering, are we seeing anything different there, or have you noticed anything different? I know we have a monitoring site there at the mouth of the river, or close to the mouth of the river.
Madam Chair? We do have monitoring locations along the river in several locations, and that we go into more detail of that in the swim plan and what the water quality look like, although we are looking primarily at nutrients.
Okay.
But we can take a deeper look at all of the, I mean, we collect, upwards of 40 analytes at those stations. And then we also have some groundwater monitoring stations in the region as well. So to answer your question, are we seeing a change since the mill closure? I don't know that I've looked at it with those eyes, but we do have, I know the projects group has a study in the works to actually kind of analyze water data prior to the mill closing and after the mill closing. And perhaps Dr. Brown can address more than I can about that.
Madam Chair, we could certainly take a look at the water quality data and see what that shows. I know that Robbie has been keeping an eye on the flows, and you do see a difference in the flows with the change in pumping at the mill. You can see both when they brought the pipeline online, you can see that change in the flow record, and then you can also see the change as they've stepped down their pumping but ceased to use that pipeline as extensively. So that data you can see, and we can put together some companion water quality data for you to take a look at.
It'd be great. I'm just curious to see what that's done, because historically that's been a very contentious subject in Taylor County for a long time, and it'd be good to have some good data or just see what's happening.
Yes.
But thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? All right, we look forward to it. Thank you. All righty, let's see here. That brings us to Hugh.
Well, good morning, Madam Chair and Board. Appreciate y'all being here this morning. Couple of items that I wanted to bring to your attention. First off, let me publicly thank the City of Live Oak. We have had some water supply issues the latter part of last week due to some main supply lines rupturing here in Live Oak. The city's been working very diligently to address that, and they continue to address those issues with it. And it is reflective, as we have seen, and we have worked to assist our communities in addressing aging infrastructure and water supply with that. So we appreciate them being diligent about getting water supply back on. We were, as was majority of the city, affected by low water pressure, as you might anticipate with that. But hopefully, I'll keep my fingers crossed that we won't have an issue today. We didn't have an issue yesterday. And so going forward, we continue to want to work with them on rectifying those issues itself. Did want to bring you up to speed. We are continuing to work with our water supply and projects groups with the utilities and also with our sister agency, St. John's, on developing projects to address our water supply needs going for today and going into the future. Some of those projects, the consultant that had been hired by the utilities and St. John's and DEP, they have drafted a final report that is under review right now, that are outlining some of those projects. And once we get a final on that, that's certainly something we can bring to the board. May well do a workshop on it and identify those projects that have, if I recall correctly, in reviewing it, they started out with some 800 projects conceptually and have brought it back down to, Amy, I'm looking at you, 8 or 9 projects at this point, or 4. I think they got the last revision, got it down to 4 projects, large projects undertaking. So They'll be expensive, but looking at that, so we eager to bring that to the board going forward with it. Troy mentioned the Water Resource Symposium coming up in January. And so save the date. We'll get Robin to put it on your calendar with that. But I do want to let you know that Tim and I were down at the Water Forum in Orlando the latter part of last week. And actually, I had some of the consultants that were in attendance there ask me about the symposium, and they were very thankful that we were putting the symposium, working with the college and consultants and putting that symposium together. I think it'll be very enlightening to our constituents here across our area that we work with from a permitting aspect going forward. So I think it'll be very helpful. And the forum was interesting. Commissioner Simpson was the keynote speaker for the forum, but certainly the topic of reuse was in the forefront and stressing that from a statewide perspective. So going forward, certainly as it has been for some time, the ability and the idea of getting reuse, whether direct reuse or indirect reuse into our water supply systems is going to be critical going forward. It's not inexpensive to treat water to get it to that point where it can be reintroduced into the potable water supply or into it from a recharge aspect. But it is necessary given the amount of water that is discharged. I'm certainly thankful to Senator Albritton for introducing legislation that requires our public utilities to eliminate surface water discharges in the future, and to begin developing those plans as to how the utilities are going to do that and put that water to a more beneficial use. Do also want to make you aware, we may well have an off-site meeting probably in February or March timeframe is what we are looking at right now. We may try to coincide that with some of the construction ongoing here, so it won't create distraction during our board meeting. We're not decided yet. We had planned an off-site last summer or earlier this summer, I guess. We're still in 24. And unfortunately, the river did not cooperate from a flooding aspect, but we'll see where it is at come February or March timeframe, and we may be able to get out and see some of the sites that we had hoped to see at that previous visit. Additionally, I've been in contact with the director over at St. John's. They are anticipating doing a ribbon cutting for their Black Creek project sometime in February. They don't have a definitive date yet, but certainly we'll keep you abreast of that because we have been invited to attend that ribbon cutting there for that project. As you may recall, that's one of the projects that St. John's, along with utilities and other water use stakeholders, have put together to get it online to where they actually take high flow water available and treat it and introduce it into the lakes over in the Keystone Lakes areas to address some MFLs there. It appears that has been successful so far, and they want to do a ribbon cutting with that, but we'll let you know with it. As was mentioned, we do have a lands committee meeting. We also have the workshop item as well today. And finally, I would like to close my report in thanking Mr. Charles for his prayer and to let the board know that I am very appreciative of the opportunity that I've had here at the district to work with this staff and work with the board. And it's been certainly one of the high points in my life to be able to address the wonderful resources that we have here. And I think those resources are dear to each one of you and the work that we do to protect those. So I just want to express my appreciation to the board. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Hugh. And likewise, I think this board is exceptionally appreciative of your guidance and leadership and of the wonderful staff that supports this district. So Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you for the kind words.
Yeah.
And Merry Christmas to the board. I hope each of you have a safe and enjoyable time with your families.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
That's it? Okay. Well, at this time, would y'all like to go ahead to, into our workshop, or would you like a break first? No breaks? Okay, let's do workshop then. Uh-huh. I'm so sorry. All right, is there a motion to adjourn our board meeting?
Make it motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you, Robin.
That's all I think. When I have lunch, we're having brunch.
Okay, that sounds good. We are ready.
Good afternoon, well, still morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. The land management team is I shouldn't say they're very excited. I'm very excited for them to present the work that they've done over the past year and the work that they are looking forward to do in FY26 and showcase their efforts, as well as talk about some of the challenge that they've had over the last year and what we are looking forward to in the upcoming year. So with that, Lorna Radcliffe will get us started and introduce the team as we go.
Morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
It is an honor for us to actually be able to present to you today, so thank you for allowing us to take this time. I'd like to cover a quick overview, especially for our new board member. The district manages 162,000 acres of fee-owned lands. We also monitor and inspect 127,000 acres of less than fee, which is conservation lands. The land management team consists of 6 members. I'd like to briefly introduce to you today. Steve Carpenter is our senior natural resource specialist. He's been with the district for 7 years, and he's been in land management field for 25. Scott Greger is a senior natural resource specialist. He's been with the district for almost 20 years, and I say almost, it's very close. He's been in the land management field for 23 years. Bill McKinstry is another senior natural resource specialist. He's been with the district for 14 years, and he's been in the land management field for 24. Rye Irby is our senior land management specialist. He's been with the district for 10 years, and he's been in the land management field for 14. Roger Gill is our newly hired land management specialist too. He's been with the district for 2 months, and he's been in land management for 40 years. He's actually in contract management training right now, so not able to be here. Lastly, I'm Lorna Radcliffe, your land management chief. I have been with the district for 3 years, and I've been in the land management field for 23. We, as a team, we manage 14 programs, and we'll dive into each of those deeper. Each team member will let you know the programs that they manage. We are responsible for $5.3 million this fiscal year, 24-25. And we take that responsibility very serious when we're working with district funds. So everything from planning, implementing, inspecting, and verifying all the work that's done that we use those funds for. Our office is governed by several different sources. We have Florida statutes, which is the management of real property, title to the governing boards of the district. And then, of course, 40B9, the administrative code for the water management lands acquisition procedures. It also covers everything from acquisition procedures to access, leases, prohibited activities, and violations. So the district land management plan, which is board approved by you guys, and it was last approved in 2018. We are looking at updating it this year and bringing it back to you for approval. But it establishes general policies that guide the management of our fee-titled lands. And then we have land management standards, which are our guidelines that we establish and are approved by the director, and they define acceptable practices for each of our programs. We also, of course, have directives and best management practices that we follow. There's a basic outline of our land management process on the slide, and basically from the onset of an offer of land to us, our team is involved and we're doing on-site inspections and assessment of that property. If we wish to pursue acquisition, our team develops a management work plan. And that plan outlines program level work that will need to be accomplished over the next 5 years, along with cost estimates, so that we're able to make good decisions about the properties that we're purchasing. And if the land is acquired, we then prep the land for the public use, boundary marking, road improvements, signs, facilities. And we also coordinate with our cooperators like FWC if we're going to put it in a wildlife management area. We then manage the land for desired future conditions, and we're continually assessing that and trying to improve year after year. So once we take the process, we actually break it down program by program. So we create 3-year plans for each of our programs. And those 3-year program or 3-year plans allow us to also include for budgeting this year, as well as looking at the preliminary budget for the following year. Also, additionally, that 3rd year of planning allows us to let Caitlin and leadership know if we need to do a legislative budget request. We also take the plan for the current fiscal year and break it down into an integrated schedule where every program has monthly breakdowns with what we're going to be doing, when, and that allows us to plan month by month, make sure we're not missing anything, we have contracts in place, and that we're able to get the resources allocated that we need to get the jobs done on each of our plans. So I keep mentioning these programs. Well, these are the 14 programs that we're going to cover, and I want to let us get kicked off with the first one, which is going to be our timber program. Steve?
Madam Chair, members of the board. As Lorna said, my name's Steve Carpenter, and I'm the land manager responsible for timber harvest and conservation easement monitoring programs. So jumping into the timber program, last year, FY '24, we did have 11 timber sales for 1,438 acres, and we realized right at 1.5 million in timber revenue from those sales. Just so you know, we do have a minimum goal of $1 million annually in our timber harvest program. So you can see, we well exceeded that minimum goal. Wanted to talk about the hurricanes. We all been talking about that. We had 3 hurricanes come through, and they did damage a lot of timber to varying degrees throughout the heart of the district. And going back to Idalia, we did salvage harvest 252 acres. That was damage caused by that, severe damage caused by that storm. There's minor damage in a lot more stands, but that was the most severe damage. So then looking at Hurricane Debbie, we had 126 acres that we're still working on getting cleaned up from that storm. And then the big one for us is going to be the Helene, as y'all are aware. Significant damage on 2,590 acres. Significant damage means we can't really move forward with the management of these stands and continue burning without liquidating them. So we're trying to get those harvested now. So looking at this year, FY '25, several months ago, I would have told you that our goal was to thin 8 different timber sales. The Hurricane Helene has changed that. Priority number 1 now is salvage harvest from that hurricane damage. So that's our focus at the moment. We do have 8 contracts in place with 4 logging crews actively harvesting at the moment. We're also working on a couple other deals as that goes. So going into the spring, we're looking at 3 timber sales. We have 3 timber thinnings. We do have three timber thinnings that were on the books for this year that are very, very wet tracks. And if we continue this dry weather, and if Robbie's right about La Nina, and we can get into the spring with dry weather, I do plan on selling those three sales, and that totals 716 acres. Looking at revenue, so best estimate at the moment is 1.5 million this year for FY25 this year. It could be more depending exactly how the weather does us with those thinnings, and also picking up our downwood from the hurricanes. Several of the tracks are down around Steinhatchee area, and they're wet tracks. So right now they're operational, but if we get much rain, that'll kind of wind that up. So that's the timber program. Let me run through conservation easement monitoring. So the district has 55 conservation easements. I got roughly 125,000 acres. It's a little bit more than that. This is our less than fee title lands where we've purchased the development of wetland rights. What I've seen is increase in popularity in conservation easements over the years, especially as developments moving into our North Florida area. They're really seen as a good way to preserve and protect properties without the expense of fee title lands and the management responsibilities of fee title lands, and it leaves these lands in private landowners' hands. So those are all good things. Looking at FY24 last year, we did update our monitoring policies and procedures. So we go to every property now every 3 years, and we meet with the landowners. We inspect the properties. We go over the terms of the easement to make sure that everything, all the management activities are in compliance with those terms. So prior to that, there was no specified return interval. So we did put that in policy, that it's 3-year return interval. Now that meant we had 8 properties that were out of that rotation. So we did complete 8 inspections in-house last year. Going to FY25, so we have contracted with the Florida Natural Areas Inventory, FNA, and they'll be conducting our inspections moving forward. And we're doing this to ensure that we can meet that 3-year rotation on those inspections, especially as we continue to add more and more conservation easements to our land base. We think that's going to be a good project moving forward. Also in that contract, they are available to update baseline information on newly acquired conservation easements. And that's those programs in a nutshell.
Madam Chair. Steve, the timber, 24 and 25, 1.5, a lot of it's salvage. What's the effect for the next 5 years? Obviously, we're going through a lot more acreage to get that amount of money than we did before.
Right, Madam Chair. So obviously there is an impact. So we do have a 25-year harvest plan, and something that's important about that plan is that we remain flexible to be able to shift things around, not just for disasters, but to take advantage of market conditions, to take advantage of weather conditions, with a lot of our properties being flood prone. So I don't see, basically at this point, we're pushing everything back 1 year. So that's the biggest impact currently. Long term, it's actually going to give us a little bit more revenue pushing out 20 years because we'll be replanting this, several thousand acres that likely we wouldn't have been harvesting 20 years out from now. So.
I could see the 10 to 20 on that shorter range.
Right now, it's just pushed everything back.
We should still be able to hit our $1 million a year.
Right. So we're working with leadership now. We do see a decrease over time just due to our current management plan and management objectives of managing for desired future conditions. Basically thin pine stands where we're burning and maintaining with fire. So we're looking at other opportunities to be able to, if that revenue does decline. I think we're good for the next 5 to 7 years, but then it might start petering out or slowing down, and we're looking at other opportunities or different ways to manage to maybe meet, make up that gap.
We appreciate the effort. I know it's challenging.
It's been interesting doing something different than normal with the salvage harvest.
I've got a couple questions, and just for my information, is there a time limit for salvage? In other words, are the trees down so it's a period, is there a time limit that nobody wants the down timber anymore?
There is, and that clock is ticking. So we've been working hard to get contracts in place and loggers on site. But there's a lot of people with a lot of wood down. So, we aren't the only ones. And we don't want to use up all the available loggers, because other people have needs too. But there is a timeline for the snapped off trees, the trees laying on the ground. I'm thinking we have another month to get those up, maybe longer if it gets cool. I'm seeing right now the bark is just starting to slip, and once the bark slips and doesn't stay on the tree, then it's no longer merchantable for pulpwood. So yes, there is a limited time. Beyond that, I think we have a window, and Mr. Schwab could maybe provide insight on that, where we may be able to chip some of that, a little bit longer window. And obviously the standing trees that are still green, leaning trees, we have a lot of those. Bent trees, as long as they're still green, they're still merchantable. It's once that bark starts slipping where the mills don't want it.
Is our price decrease when we have salvage timber instead of regular cut timber?
It does.
It does.
Ma'am.
How do we clean up the timber tracks? If we ended up with down trees, nobody wants, can't do anything with it, how do we clean that up before planting?
So that's what we've been talking about. So obviously we want to salvage as much as possible. And I talked with Northwest Florida Water Management District foresters from Hurricane Michael, and they were only able to salvage about 30% of what they wanted to. We're going to be above that amount because we did act quickly on getting that done. I got a little sidetracked. What was the specific question?
Oh, which is how do we clean it up to plant?
So we've looked at a couple options, and one of them is actually going in and cutting the dead, like leaners and that sort of thing, to get them on the ground and then rake, pile, and burn. So essentially that's the answer, is root, rake, pile, and burn, to be able to, reforest those sites.
It's a lot of raking.
It's a lot of work, and not just that, some of these areas are very wet. That's what's kind of challenging us, getting the wood harvested. So some of them are just this week drying out enough to be able to harvest in, and I see we have rain coming tonight. So that's going to be weather dependent.
Okay. One more question. I know that there are a lot of grants out there now to help the loss of timber for private individuals. Does the district, are we eligible for any of that cost for the damage that we had suffered?
So I don't know the answer to that. I think that Lorna may be able to answer some help we may be able to get through FEMA. So we have been documenting the damage that we have. We also, the programs I'm aware of are specifically for private landowners.
Okay.
I don't know of anything for public lands at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, all right. Good luck.
Chair, members of the board. So I just wanted to give you a quick report on all the vegetation management work that we completed in 2024. And just as a reminder, some of the main vegetation management goals that we have listed in our land management plan are things like natural community restoration and management, hazardous fuel reduction, and reforestation support. And so essentially what this means is that we're using tools like prescribed fire, mechanical treatments like roller chopping and mowing, as well as herbicide treatments to help restore our natural communities to their designated desired future conditions, reduce the hazardous buildup of fuels to help protect our timber resources from potential wildfire damage, as well as support our reforestation efforts by conducting both mechanical and chemical site prep work, as well as site prep burning too. So in table 1, we've kind of listed all of our accomplishments for 2024, and I'm just going to kind of start at the top with prescribed fire. So looking at prescribed fire, we planned on burning 12,300 acres, and we ended up burning 9,900 acres. And the areas that we didn't burn were areas located on our Mallory Swamp tract that were just essentially too wet for us to get in and do any burning. The next one down, roller chopping for site prep purposes. We planned on doing 200 acres of roller chopping, and we ended up doing 141 acres. And the areas that we did not roller chop were areas that we decided to do just herbicide applications in place of the roller chopping work. And then the next one was Mallory Swamp, mowing and chopping. We planned in 2024 to do 1,300 acres of mowing and chopping, and we ended up doing 579 acres. And again, the areas that we did not chop in Mallory Swamp were areas that were just too wet for our equipment to enter and stand up. And then woods mowing, we planned on doing 1,500 acres, and we actually got quite a bit more done than that, and ended up getting about 2,100 acres of woods mowing completed in 2024. And then the other good thing that happened in 2024 is we received a $270,000 grant from the Florida Forest Service, which helped pay for that woods mowing work, or part of that woods mowing work, and then paid for all of the work that happened in Mallory Swamps. All the 579 acres of mowing and chopping in Mallory Swamp was all grant funded. And then the last thing, table 1, is our herbicide treatments. We had planned on doing 250 acres of herbicide treatments for site prep, and we met that goal and completed all of that. And then looking forward to 2025, again, these are all goals, to help us meet the goals that we have stated in our land management plan. So in 2025, we're planning on burning 10,650 acres, mechanically treating about 4,100 acres, and herbiciding about 117 acres. And the other good thing about this year is we were fortunate enough to receive another $340,000 grant from the Florida Forest Service to help us pay for all that mechanical treatment work. And that's all I have. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Good luck. The top picture you had, was that the roller chopping?
Excuse me?
The top picture that you had, was that roller chopping?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the governing board, I'm going to present on a few other programs that the district does under the umbrella of natural resource management. The first one, when you have timber sales, clear cuts, and buying land, you often have a responsibility of reforesting those land. And last fiscal year, last winter, we planted 312 acres with longleaf pine, both hand and mechanical planting. And this fiscal year, this winter, hopefully starting very soon, we have 293 acres that we're going to plant with longleaf pine through machine planting. And when I say machine planting, that's the planter down there at the bottom of the slide. Another program the district tries to do every year, some of these are kind of newish programs. 15 years ago, we were doing them a little bit more, but we're trying to bring them back into some sort of rotation.
is our ecological services. And under that, we have essentially 4 different things we're working on. One of those is our rare plant surveys. These are usually done on some of our more newer tracks or tracks that just haven't had never been explored for rare plant species. And generally these are contracts we have with FNA to accomplish that. So last year we explored 2,957 acres, and this year we have 2,269 acres that we're going to try to look at for rare plants. Go for tortoise monitoring. Last year we set up 315 acres worth of transects, where we're only able to get about 56% of that done. This year, we have 160 acres of transects we're going to try to do. And a lot of these acres move back and forth. This is totally based on what Scott or Steve is accomplishing in terms of management impacts, let's call them. When we have a heavy equipment, mowing, roller chopping, things like that, we're trying to maintain some balance between, making sure our rare species are being monitored or are being maintained, or maybe even improving. That's the kind of the goal between, these programs. Also, we have 13 known sites for wading bird rookeries, probably more. But we have 13. We were only able to visit 38% of those. So this year we're going to try to look at that same 13. And of course, wading bird rookeries are, pretty good indicators of a healthy ecosystem. You're not going to have mating pairs and large quantities of birds if the water quality and the environment isn't beneficial for that. We also do natural community mapping. So the basis of our land management plan for natural resource management is based on what the natural communities are. I mean, that is the literal foundation that the management plan is built around. So a lot of these natural community mapping, again, is either newer tracts of land, and we're not also trying to now go in and try to actually map some of our smaller tracts of land we have elsewhere, so we get a really good basis of what we have out there. So last year we mapped 1,150 acres, and this year we're looking at hopefully doing 313 acres.
Bill?
Yes, ma'am.
Go back to your slide.
Accomplish that.
Or you can just,
There you go.
the picture with the little knife there, was that a bird dusting, or what have you got there?
Oh, where the where my knife is?
Uh-huh.
That's a black bear.
Okay.
Print. I'm trying to remember. Oh, that was in our Jones Mill Creek track over there on the Acilla River. So another program, and this is, of course, everyone probably heard of these programs, invasive plant management. Every agency in the state has some form of this. And as y'all, probably many of you have heard many times, I've said, we are very fortunate in this water management district to have probably the smallest population of invasive plant species in the state of Florida. I mean, we have water management districts that have a larger invasive exotic budget than this entire district does as a whole. So, so last year our goal was to treat 133 acres with contractors. We managed to get 73% of that completed. We also have the responsibility of treating exotics on Edwards Bottomland and Stark Bypass properties. There's mitigation sites. We got both of those sites 100% treated. And this fiscal year, same thing. Well, we got like 7 acres of Edwards Bottomland to do by August 12th. And Stark Bypass, we're going to try, they're going to another 250 acres we're going to try to treat. And with our contractors, we're going to try to get 145 acres of exotics treated. And I guess to wrap it up, something else we're working on, boundary line surveying and marking. I'll just start off, our goal last year, you see that big number, 2,996 acres. That's actually consists of just like 6 acres
of some conservation easement surveying we had to do, but then the big Pinahatchee track. So it was actually just 2 survey events we had done, but altogether 2,009, almost 3,000 acres. We got all that done. FY25, our goals kind of depends. We're in the midst of it right now, trying to figure out what direction we want to go. Some of these tracks we bought, 5, 6, 7 years ago. They've never been marked. Some of them got the surveys. Like I said, weren't marked, or some of the tracks were purchased without any surveying and marking done on them. So we're kind of sorting through that right now. So what we know is we have about 668 acres that could be surveyed and marked. 9 acres that could be marked. We have the boundary survey, just never got marked, and 196 acres that could be surveyed but don't need any marking. So that's
Madam Chair.
questions.
Yeah, Bill, the last one, clarify that.
Which one?
The last one.
The last
196
196
could be
acres.
surveyed and no marking.
So basically, the tracks is situated. I'm going to use this as an example. We have a piece of land down in Dixie County that we purchased. We did a trade. It's not even purchase. We did a trade. We did a land swap when Steve Schroeder was here. So we got a parcel down there that is situated in the middle of what we own now. Now we had it surveyed, but it never got marked. So that's, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, should we even worry about marking it? Maybe.
Because it's inside of us.
Yeah, we basically kind of one side, it could be marked, but is it important?
I was just wondering why we would survey something. else.
That's why I'm saying, that's why I said it depends in that first bullet point. We're in the middle of it right now, trying to figure out what we're going to do.
Are any of those acres part of the land swap we did for RO Ranch?
No, ma'am, that is completely done. That's part of that 2,990 acres. That's taken care of. We got the natural communities map on that one too. It's been marked. And we're working towards what we're going to do recreationally speaking. How, but we've moved on from the ground floor. Let's put it that way.
Good. Any other questions? All righty.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. So I understand in public speaking, generally people appreciate brevity. That's not necessarily my strong suit. I'm going to do my best. But this is what we're doing, so let's go. So we've been talking about, natural resource management. And we have the land management team. It's really broken in half. There's natural resource managers and there's 2 resource managers, or 2 land managers, I should say. I'm one of those. Roger Gill, the new employee, is the other. And so what I basically deal with is infrastructure, what we would call a facility. And so that's the things like roads, ditches, culverts. It could be pride fencing. It could be a recreational site. It could be a seawall at a featured site, recreation spot. But so generally what we're talking about is infrastructure. And it's infrastructure that I look after, and we're going to talk about the roads and the hydro facility program first. That's a large program that I oversee. Maybe 5 years ago, I did a workshop just on the road and hydro program. Mr. Schwab requested that, I think, and we did that here and discussed it. I'm not going to go into as much detail on this because I have 3 other programs to talk about, and so I'm going to move through this rather quickly. I'll just give a little bit of backstory on this and our road network generally. We have 791 miles of road. That's classified into 3 different categories. That's public roads, secondary, and administrative roads. Some of those are laid out in mileages there on the table. And it's important to know that this sounds like a large number. In fact, it is. Most of our roads are administrative roads. That's 437 miles of those. And we don't do annual maintenance on these roads. Many of these roads are behind lock gates. The public is not allowed on those roads. And so they're used generally for the benefit of works of the district. Most of these are access roads that allow us into our timber holdings. So we would maintain those roads, improve them to the extent we need, or rehab them to the extent that they need before, during, or after a timber harvest. These roads don't cost a lot as it refers to road maintenance particularly. The next category I mentioned was secondary. Secondary roads are open to the public. They're in our management standards held to a lesser maintenance quality, and so we don't always do annual maintenance on these roads. These roads get fixed as they need it, case by case basis, assessed as we plan the new year, and then maintained in kind of locale centric type repair applications. The public roads, however, are roads that are open to the public. They're held to a high standard, meaning you should be able to drive a car on them. They're the most frequented roads in our district, and we have 186 miles of those. But of that 186 miles, there's about 140 miles that we do annual routine maintenance. So I break it down, the road repairs, into two types of work. What I would call annual routine, which we try to do something on that every time, and kind of a preventative type maintenance. So we go in there and we take a grader. We've been increasing our grader operations every year, probably for the last 3 years. We found a lot of cost savings in doing grader work. We'll supplement that grading with additional lime rock as needed. Our roads, our public roads particularly, have a lot of lime rock on them from years of patching technique. And so what we're doing now in an effort to provide a better quality road to the public usership and for our own works is use a grader. We've seen some cost savings in that. And so on that 140 miles, we do some patching. Some of these roads are grassy roads. Predominantly, they're larger, old grades that were used in silvicultural applications from years gone by. We're still using them for that ourselves. All of these roads are imported to our own operations as well as used by the public. And so we try to keep these in good shape. And so it's really that 140 miles that we put a lot of work into. That's where a lot of the money comes in. And this is talking about preventative routine road maintenance. We have another category, which are project roads. Project roads are roads that require a lot more work. They're roads that need to be brought back into the fold, or it's a new parcel that we've gotten that has bad road network, and we're trying to redo these roads in order to access our timber holdings. That's what we're doing. When we get a new property, we're not going and using every road within that property. In fact, some of those roads may be abandoned. Some of those roads are not useful to recreation or for works of the district. Basically, when we get a larger parcel, a Pinehachie edition of the Steinhatchee Springs tract that Bill was making reference to is a good example. We're not going to reclaim all the roads that are in there. In fact, some of them we might plant across or allow to grow up or go back into that natural community that it should be to begin with. But the ones that access our timber holdings, we have to repair to the extent that we can haul timber. And if we're going to do that, and if it can haul timber on it, then we'll look at it also as maybe a potential road for recreation. Within our miles of road that we have, and because of the hurricane and some other reasons that were unforeseen, Scott Greger and I and the rest of the crew have been assessing the entirety of our road network. Scott's been bearing the lion's burden of this. We've been working together closely with it because I oversee the infrastructure there, the road network. And we've been reducing a lot of roads, either through abandoning administrative roads that are no longer necessary, or by changing classification, which would reduce the management of that particular road network. A good example, we worked through the Upper Swanee and the Alapaha River Basin, and we've reduced 31 miles over the last 3 weeks. In that area, it's an 18% reduction. We're going to do that not just in the Upper Swanee, we're going to do it in the middle and the lower. We're going to do it in every land parcel that we own that has a road network. We're assessing every section of road. And where it's applicable and appropriate, we're eliminating roads or changing classification. This is a benefit and a cost savings, not in just road maintenance, but the other two programs that I'm going to mention after this. In FY24, we plan to do 143 miles of routine maintenance. In the end, we accomplished only 100 miles of that. And one of the reasons that that was the case is, weather, the road network is really affected greatly by wet conditions. And so if it's too wet in an area, we might have to skip over it. We'll catch it next year. It's not too big a deal. The main reason, though, however, is we did 2 road projects that we didn't initially plan for, but there was a need, and so leadership desired that we improve 2 sections of road within our holdings. One of them is on the Withlacoochee tract. That's the Pot Springs Access Road. Some of you might remember that there was a recreation site there that was improved some years ago at Pot Springs. This is a parcel that's managed by Twin Rivers State Forest. There's nice work there in securing the bank, improving access, sidewalks, etc. The road to get to it was not good. It was rough. It was sand, long sand beds, and a lot of corrugations in the road. We went in there and leveled that out, capped the road, and made a lot of improvements. This would be considered a project road, not just one for reclaiming a road for the purpose of silviculture. This one was really done. I mean, there's timber holdings down that road. This one was done for recreation, and that was the primary use of this road project. So now we have a good road that goes to a nice recreational site where we didn't have that before. The other project that came into the fold was a public, what will be a public access road into a recreational site in the Piney Hatchie addition of Seenahatchee Springs. We keep talking about that. This is a picture here of that road when it was being constructed. It looks better than that now. That was after a big rain. I went in there to just see if the road would be above the ditches or above the water line. It was. Anyway, so this is a project road. This is one where we kind of sculpted the ditches and pulled the road back up to its original width. And that would be an example of a project road. I want to go back to this picture. We can't hardly talk about this fiscal year without addressing the hurricanes. Every program was greatly affected by it. A good example is this picture on the right. That's in the Christian tract. Some of you may know where that is. It's near Dowling Park. This is a armored crossing. Whenever the river comes up, this whole entire road goes underwater. And so we used hard rock here because it wouldn't be washed away like road base is. It turns to mush. This stuff will be here long after I'm gone, and will still serve its purpose. But I go back to point at this picture because if you were to go here before the 2 hurricanes, before the 3, but the last 2 were the real doozy, this would have been a green tunnel. Like you would literally drive through a green tunnel and completely canopy and completely enclosed by canopy. That's what it did to Dowling Park. And so afterwards, you couldn't see this road. There were many more trees along this road corridor as there was on a lot of our road corridors. This road was totally obliterated. You couldn't even tell there was a road there. And so this was after we rehabbed that area. Let me keep moving. And so FY25, we're supposed to talk about what we did last year and what we're going to do this year. We have 145 miles of routine road maintenance planned. That's at 140 of those key roads that I talked about, plus 5 others. And we have 23 miles of project road. We have some secondary roads that have really fallen apart in Mallory and also Steenahatchee Springs. The idea is to go in there and with a project road, generally you're doing ditch pulling, heavy applications of lime rock and things like that. So when we have that need, that's a project road. It's not routine. It's a little extra. I have plans for that in Mallory and Steenahatchee Springs tract. Honestly, I'm not sure we're going to get to it. I'll just be transparent in the fact that there's been a lot of cost associated with cleaning these roads up. and removing the trees from our road network. So there may not be enough money to get to our project roads. I have my jaws set on doing our routine 140 miles. That I think we can do, that I'm confident we can do. Some of the extra stuff we might have to put off, like Steve said, it might set us back a year. It could be at the end of the fiscal year that we will find some money, or it could be that I have a little extra and things go well and we get in there and do some of this project work. On our west side of our Pinahatchee addition, we have a spine road there that's in very bad shape, and I need to do a project road on that to start entering into that parcel where we can get in and do some work and gain access into our timber holdings efficiently. Right now, you have to have four-wheel drive to get in there, so it's an important project. It might have to wait till FY26. All right, the next program, there's a trend here. I do all things associated with roads. So if it's roads or a culvert, if it's ditch mowing, if it's road mowing, that's what I do. So all of those programs are under me. This is a ditch and daylight mowing program that I oversee. Last year, we had a very successful year in this program. It was my first year in the program. I've really actually enjoyed it. I have a fantastic contractor that has great work ethic and integrity, great quality control, and they do some amazing work, and it was because of them that it was successful. We originally planned to do 99 miles of ditches, ditch and daylight mowing. So what we're doing here is our properties are very fertile. They're very wet. They grow quickly, and it's just a matter of time, even with regular routine rotary mowing, that they slowly are overtaken by the vegetation. And so you have to have specialty mowing equipment to keep these road corridors open. In order to do that, you have to really kind of have a separate program that attends to that, because it's outside the scope of a rotary mower, just routine road mowing. And so that's what they're doing here. This picture was taken in Mallory Swamp. If you see the vegetation where that cutter head is, it was basically that thick right on the roadside edge or within 6 feet of it, because the rotary mower was mowing the rest. Now, it does look nice to have your road corridors open. It's better for works of the district. It's better for public use. But it goes beyond that. This daylighting actually is key to a lot of what we do, and it has benefits that might not be just noticed on the surface level. One is it allows these roads to get sunlight, and that's really good in these wet conditions, because with that Florida sun beating on them, it keeps them drier, and the drier the road is, the better it holds up. We get a lot of public use in hunting season in Mallory. And if we can keep, and if we have an open road corridor, that sun is really key in keeping these road networks dried up and then in long-term better condition. The next part of having these this program and having these road corridors open with this ditch and daylight mowing is it allows a wider corridor for prescribed fire, and also for if we had a wildfire situation, we would have larger and wider, wider fire breaks. In Mallory Swamp, that's a big deal. Some of you guys remember the wildfire that was out there. That was one of the critiques, is that that time and during that ownership of the property, the roads were so grown in, they couldn't use them as suitable lines. And so with the fuel reduction that Scott does from prescribed fire, and also mechanical treatments, and keeping these road corridors open and the roads drivable, we're actually doing preventive maintenance and as such if this becomes a fire line or a contingency line in the case of wildfire. So it's not just important in Mallory, but all tracks. This is a program that I have intentions to grow through persuasion. I'm going to work that the best that I can, because we need it on all of our properties. And so in saying that, what I would like to do ultimately is keep this vegetation in a lower class, because that's how we're charged. If it's a class 1, it's a larger category and it has a larger price per ditch mile. If it's a category 2, it's half that cost. And so if we can keep everything in a lower category, then ultimately we can save money and keep our roads daylit it's my desire to have all our tracks on a 5-year rotation, keeping everything in a Class 2 category. Originally, full circle, we planned on doing 99 miles. In the end, we were able to do 152 ditch miles. We got a little extra money mid-fiscal year last year, and we did most of that on Mallory Swamp. So we did 152 ditch miles, but we still have a little bit left. There's a lot of miles in Mallory. I'm going to finish those up this year. That's my goal in FY25, to have Mallory kind of date stamped and completely ditch mode within a 2-year period. We have that one out of the way, and then we're going to move on to other areas in FY25. Again, there is some cost to the budgets that we might not have been foreseen. And so some of what we had planned to do next fiscal year, we in fact might not get to do because the cost of actually open our roads back up after the hurricane. These were some of the roads that we had planned to do on some of the tracks we had planned to do. Some of those we're certainly still going to do. We're going to work in 47 Bridge in Gilchrist. We're going to work in Steenahatchee Falls and Rise. And we're going to work in Mallory Swamp. The other ones might have to wait. We'll see how it goes. Here's an example right now of a road that, or FY24 was day lit. This is another picture of Mallory. And so if you see the vegetation on the right, it wasn't as dramatic as that. It's about half that height, but it was like that, you know, close to the road edge. We'll be able to maintain much of this with a rotary mower at a cheaper per mile rate now that this is cut down. So we've already done that. We've done an annual mowing this year, or first cycle mowing in Mallory. And so this stuff that was heavy, that was, you know, ditch mode, can later be, most of it can be actually maintained now with a rotary mower. And hopefully, if things go well, some of that more woody type shrub will be replaced by grasses and be maintained at a cheaper rate under another contract. District road mowing. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the third type, or the third road associated program that I oversee, and this one is just road mowing. That's really not all that exciting, but it's also important because if you don't mow it, you're going to get all that other vegetation, and then you're going to have to take it out with the ditch and daylight mowing program, and of course that comes at a cost, more significant cost per mile, and so. In the past, in FY24, it was a little bit difficult year for that road mowing program. We got the northwest and the southeast regions mowed successfully with 3 mowing cycles. That's how we take care of it. We mow 3 different times during the growing season, and on our public, secondary, and administrative roads. At this time, we had 2 contractors. The district was split kind of crossways, so one contractor did northwest, southeast, the opposite for the other. The contractor that oversaw the southwest and northeast canceled his contract midway through, leaving half of the tracks unmowed for 6 months. The idea was we would rebid that out and start afresh in this fiscal year, and that's what we've done. We have one contractor. He has a competitive rate. He does good work on the stuff that he started. We got a little bit of late start because of the hurricane, and all of our efforts were associated with cleaning that up. But we've started our mowing cycle, and they're doing amazing work. Mallory Swamp has just been mowed. And we're expecting big things out of this program going forward. There's one contractor that oversees it all. So they're capable and willing, and I'm expecting to report good things next fiscal year. All right, the last one that I'm going to talk about, and one that I'm currently managing to some degree, but more with help with Lorna and Roger as he comes in and full speed on this, is the District Track Improvements Program. So the District Track Improvements Program is generally designed to improve infrastructure that already exists on the district. It also could be to construct new infrastructure. We're very careful about new infrastructure. We understand the cost of maintenance going forward and all those things involved with it. There are certain situations where the usership would benefit as well as a natural resource. And so in those cases, if we can come up with some low maintenance, low cost improvements, infrastructure to build then we do construct those, and on a limited basis. But first I'll talk about, infrastructure that we already have. And in FY '24, we accomplished, really, a large part of any improvement project is dealing with the design and permitting. And so we have a park in the Steenhatchee River Basin called Steenhatchee Falls Park. Some of you have been there. If you haven't, it's a beautiful place. It has aging infrastructure. It has a nice seawall that's visually appealing, and you can see it on the bottom left there. It's made out of riprap set in concrete. It fits in nice with the natural setting. Unfortunately, it's old and it's in need of some repairs, and it also doesn't extend the full length of the recreational site. You see in the bottom left, it's that attractive wall is being undermined. You can see on the top right that the wall ends before it ties into the boat ramp there. That boat landing was put there, I think, probably by a timber company. It's at the end of its service life. It needs to be repaired. We see the need here. We see the bank erosion. We see the issues that it has. So, we act to fix. So how do we do that? Well, first, in a project like this, it's more complicated. It's going to require a lot of complex permitting and other things. We've sought the help of professionals. So we entered into a contract with Utah Engineering, and last year they did the design, engineering, permitting, and developing an estimation of cost of construction to make these much needed repairs. They also did some survey and geotechnical data for the engineers to design the seawall extension and all of that. It's been quite involved. We have permits that have been submitted to Army Corps of Engineers and DEP. They've been responding to them and working with them to get these permits for us. The whole idea is once we have the design, the engineering, and the permitting, we're going to have a shovel-ready project. And it's at that point in FY '25, so here we are at FY '25, we're going to take and submit that project to the Florida Boater Improvement Program. It's a FWC grant for them to fund projects like this. Our hope is they'll accept that grant application and they'll build it for us. And we'll be able to have these much needed improvements to building a new boat ramp, extending the seawall, and shoring up the one section that needs it, and have a new project, have a new nice recreational site that's a benefit to the public usership and also not a detriment to the natural resource. So that's a main goal. Also in FY '24, we did a little dock repair on the Pinehachee fishing dock. When we got that parcel, there's this a pond out there that had a little fishing dock on it. Leadership thought that would be a good place to open recreation so the people can enjoy the land that they own. And so we did the improvements. We shored it up. We put some new boards on it, made it look anew. And that is the reason for that first road access that we did into that Pinehachee addition, the one that you saw on previous slides. We got that constructed. And we're working on the road, and in time, we're going to get that section of Pinehachee opened up to the public so they can enjoy it. So that was an FY '24 accomplishments. There's a few properties listed here on this slide. I believe this is my last one, and then we'll move on to other things. But the Steenhatchee Falls Park improvement is the one that I was referring to in FY '25. We have another boat landing on the Mount Gilead track called Reams Landing. It has a primitive boat landing. You can see there a picture of it where it accesses the water. This is when the river was at a pool that you could actually see what was going on there. The boat ramp needs repair. It needs basically what Steenhatchee needs, just in Steenhatchee Park needs, just the landing. We're only interested in repairing the landing to improve access to the usership. It's a project on the list. A lot of these projects are going to have to be triaged. The hurricane impacted a lot of our featured recreation sites dramatically. And then another one came and it affected it dramatically again. And so we have a lot of things that need to be improved. Some of these may be triaged and might not be gotten to this year just from the voluminous amounts of improvements that some of these wreck sites need because of the hurricanes. It seems like this fiscal year, everything we have been doing is in action or reaction to the hurricanes that we've received over the last 2 years. And it's taken a lion's share of our time. So, you know, we'll see how it goes and where we will be. We can talk about it in FY26. We have a lot of plans. We have more plans in time, so we're going to have to kind of focus on where we get the most bang for our buck. In closing, one other track that's on the project list is the Lasky track at Nature Coast. This is a new acquisition that we got maybe a couple of year or so ago. I don't know, it's a beautiful piece of property. It butts up to the Nature Coast, so it's kind of like an addition to the Nature Coast track down there in Fannin Springs. Absolutely gorgeous, beautiful high river bluff that overlooks the Greenways and Trails Railroad trestle. The bad thing about it is it's absolutely covered in litter. It's been used as an illegal dumping site for probably 50 years. I could paint a picture, but it's not pretty. It was a valuable purchase, has a lot of benefits, both to protecting the natural environment and also public use. But there's so much illegal dumping out there that we're going to have to go out there and do a big cleanup project. But that's what we're here for. You know, what else could you do? I mean, it's good that we own it. It needs to be cleaned up. We're the people for it. So it's a project that we're looking forward to. Involved in that cleanup, we first have to limit access. There's no real fence that prevents the illegal dumping, so we have to get that section along the road edge where there's illegal access surveyed, and then we have to build a robust fence, and then we'll work on the cleanup plan, which is the larger of all three. This is kind of what we're looking at. These are the programs that I manage, and if you guys have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them to the extent that I'm capable.
Any questions from the board? None? Like big projects.
Madam Chair.
All right, I'm going to close it up with our track maintenance, boundary marking, and cultural resource and general public use programs that Edwin, he retired in August, Roger started, and I'll be glad to fill in for this information. So we have 5 featured sites. Telford, Falmouth, and Swanee Springs are all in Swanee County. We have Steenhatchee Falls, which is in Taylor, and we have Goose Pasture Campground that's in Jefferson. And those are the ones that we spend a lot of time in maintenance on, just because of the volume of public use. We also have 314 dispersed sites, huge amount, covering over 13 counties in the district. So the largest volume of them is in what we call the Northeast or Upper Swanee region. We have like 120. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of contract maintenance hours to get out there and get to all those sites. We issue special use authorizations for people to access those sites. So the bulk of those SUAs that we issue are for recreation. And canoe camping or boating camping along the rivers is the largest amount of SUAs that we issue, followed by fishing, coon hunting, frogging, and group camping, respectively. So there's a lot of coon hunting going on our property. Non-recreation SUAs include studies by universities, also like paddling outposts or different access needs. It's a lot of use, like I said, across 13 counties. We also do boundary line marking. So that initial purchase, when we're trying to get a survey, get the lines marked, we have a standard to come back. In every 5 years, we're trying to update those boundary line marks. So remarking, basically. In fiscal year 24, there was 200 miles that we had planned to do. We, because of budget We managed 99 of those miles. We also try to focus within river basins. So last year it was in the Steinhatchee River Basin. Fiscal year 25, we're looking at the Osceola and Ecofina River Basins. And we're planning on doing 200 miles in that basin for Ecofina. Cultural resources. So we have a lot of studies that are done on our property when we acquire them. One of those things is there any significant sites or historical sites? So we have 67 known sites on our district lands. 23 have been designated as significant by the Division of Historical Resources and recorded in the Florida Master Site File. And so we are required to do annual inspection on those. And in fiscal year 24, we did achieve that. We also did 3 additional site inspections. 17 sites that we have been identified and have site ID numbers by DHR, but they're not considered significant, and we don't have the requirement to actually inspect them every year. We also have 27 sites that have been identified by the district and reported, but they don't have site ID numbers through DHR yet. And most of those are found by staff as far as like looted sites that we report to FWC and to DHR. And that's what you see there is a looted site. Also, the other is a cemetery that we got to this past year. And as you can see, the hurricane damage with the downed trees is very fortunate. So, all right, our section, as they each have kind of alluded to, has been greatly impacted over the last year by hurricanes. So we had Hurricane Idalia that we finished up at the beginning of the year. We had a no-name thunderstorm that came through that, again, we had to start road clearing. And then Hurricane Debbie came along before we even finished the thunderstorm damage. And with Hurricane Debbie, we had started doing some cut and toss operations. Anything that we had identified during Hurricane Debbie stayed classified under Hurricane Debbie with FEMA. Anything new from Hurricane Helene became classified as Hurricane Helene. And so with Hurricane Debbie, we are complete with our cut and toss operations. And we have 4 facilities that we have identified that need repairs because of damage from Debbie. Those are Falmouth Springs, Swanee Springs, Owen Springs, and Steinhatchee Falls. As you can imagine, Steinhatchee Falls already had a little bit of erosion problems, but with that extra water, the flooding, the erosion's getting drastically worse. So we're looking at that. With Helene, we are 96% complete with opening up our tracks from the cut and toss operations. We still have some admin roads we're working on in Mallory and the Steinhatchee tract. And we have a couple small tracks in the Upper Swanee that our staff are working on to open up. We also identified 5 facilities that need repair projects from Helene. So we have Blue Sink Canoe Launch, Blue Sink Overlook, Gar Pond Docks, the Lukens Track Canoe Launch, and Atsina Odie's Boardwalk got devastated. So we'll be looking at those and working with FEMA to try to do projects to get those repaired. As a final thought, I just want to remind all of you that our land management review, we are starting to plan for it for next year. We encourage you to come get a deeper look at what we actually do as a land management team and see on the ground some of the things that we're making differences with. Last year we did it in Mallory. This year we're planning on trying to do it in the Northwest. So, any questions that anyone has?
Any questions from the board? All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, that concludes our workshop item. I would just like to say that the land management team and the Division of Operations and Outreach, we are very, very grateful for the board's support for our land management activities along with our other programmatic activities. Without your support, we would not be able to manage over 160,000 acres plus almost another 125,000 acres of conservation easements in an effort to keep the Swanee Valley the way that it is that we like it now, while still helping provide opportunities for growth. So we appreciate your support.
It's been a rough year. It's rough 2 years.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. At this time, is there a motion to close our workshop? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. All right. Is that that's all we've got for today?
No, we have
No.
a committee,
Oh, Plans Committee. Sorry about that. All right. Well, I'll turn it over to you then.
10-minute break.
10-minute break. Sounds good. Okay.
Could be a mutiny if we start.
Open.
We can get everybody's attention and get ready to roll here. I was expecting to have brunch today, but looks like it's going to be more like lunch, but it's okay. We're good. I'd like to call this Lands Committee meeting to order. Ms. Robin, would you do the roll call, please?
Mr. Schwab?
Here.
Mr. Keith?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Sessions?
Here.
Mr. Thompson? Mr. Wheeler?
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Robin. I haven't received any public comment papers here, but as long as we're asking, is there anybody here in the public that would like to make a comment for the good of the cause? You're more than welcome to have the floor at this time. Seeing that there are none, we're going to move forward with what we're doing. By the way, this meeting is conducted in the public, and it's on our YouTube link. And you're more than welcome to tune in if you're not here in person. Kayla, I'm going to turn the floor over to you and let you do the property exchange surplus declaration.
Very good, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Item number 3 for your Lands Committee will be for action today. And just to prepare you, items number 4 and 5 are for informational purposes today. They're presentations, and based off of feedback from the board, we would likely from the committee, we would likely bring those to the board in January for formal action. So item 3 is for action today. Items number 4 and 5 are for informational purposes with a future action. What we have before us for item number 3 is a request to surplus the district's Santa Fe Springs parcels located in Suwannee County that comprise of approximately 13 acres, and also authorize negotiations with Kurt and Karen Ardeman on the parcels for which they are adjacent. In 2023, the district had begun, and prior to this program coming over to my division, the district had begun discussions with Mr. and Mrs. Ardeman regarding a potential surplus and or an exchange for 3 of the Santa Fe Springs parcels located in Suwannee County. The tract consists of 5 separate parcels, which total 13 acres, as I mentioned, and the Ardemans, which I'll show you on a map, are adjacent to 3 of the parcels. The Ardemans are seeking a surplus sale pursuant to 373-089 8A of Florida statutes that allows for the surplus sale of parcels that are adjacent if those adjacent parcels are individually valued at less than $25,000. So that is the key factor to consider here, is that you have to meet the adjacency rule, and you also have to meet the valuation of less than $25,000 to be able to surplus to the adjacent landowners. The Santa Fe Springs parcels, all 5, were purchased in July of 1998 using Save Our Rivers funds. Due to the natural community type, which the team just talked about, the mapping, the small acreage, the proximity to residential areas, and isolation from other tracts, the parcels are not actively being managed. The parcels have been included on internal staff lists for potential surplus since October 2021. And when I say internal staff surplus lists, those are working lists that we keep kind of running at any given time of properties that we may potentially bring to the committee and to the board for surplus. So these have been on, like I said, an internal staff list since 2021. The Santa Fe Springs parcels were reviewed by the staff land acquisition and surplus team and formally recommended for surplus by that team on October 29th, 2024. The surplus, should the committee and board approve it, would include deed restrictions on the Santa Fe Springs parcels to restrict future development, which would satisfy the original conservation goals of the acquisition. All 5 of the parcels are being recommended for surplus. The 3 parcels which the Ardemans are seeking are listed there. If the parcels are approved for surplus, appraisals will be conducted on the 3 adjacent parcels to determine the value. If the adjacent parcels are valued at less Bless you. At less than $25,000 each, the district may proceed with negotiations with the Ardemans as authorized in the statutes. If the parcels are approved for surplus and the adjacent lots are valued at greater than $25,000, the district may list them for sale to the highest bidder or offer the property as an exchange. The current procedure requires an appraisal to be provided upon request for surplus of undeclared lands, of which these would qualify. However, as these parcels have been on an internal surplus list for several years, staff requests that the committee approve the surplus and authorize negotiations on the adjacent parcels. The appraisal costs will be incurred by the Ardemans on the adjacent parcels. So that's important to note that they are responsible, the Ardemans are responsible for the appraisal on the adjacent parcels. In accordance with the procedure, a site visit was performed on November 21st, 2024. Based on the date of the acquisition, back in July 1998, a 2/3 vote will be required by the board to surplus the parcels in accordance with the statute. If approved, the surplus will be noticed on the district website. Maps of the proposed properties are attached, which we see here. So that's the reason I went through that and read it word for word is because the memorandum lays out the requirements of the statute. It also lays out the requirements of our current procedure to make sure that we are in compliance with the statute and with the procedure. And as I mentioned, there's several boxes that have to be checked to be in alliance with the statute and the procedure. I also want to mention before we look at the maps that I consulted with legal for this transaction to make sure that to the best of our abilities, we were in compliance. What you see listed here is the properties that are being requested. The properties in yellow are owned by the Ardemans. The properties in green are known as the Santa Fe Springs Tract, and the properties that are hatched are the properties due to the adjacency rule are being requested for the adjacency surplus. But as a reminder, we are requesting that the board surplus all 5 parcels because they've been identified for that the committee would approve all 5 parcels for surplus and then authorize negotiations on the 3 adjacent parcels with costs to be incurred by the Ardemans.
So is the plan, Caitlin, for the Ardemans to, because of the adjacency rule, try to acquire the other 2 lots too?
Our current conversations with them are the 3 that they have is their primary goal. I think over time, if made available, they may seek the additional 2 once they are adjacent to those, but their primary goal are the 3 that are sandwiched around them.
And the 3 that are sandwiched around them, you're thinking it's gonna, the appraisal's probably gonna come in at less than the $25,000 mark? Or is it per parcel?
Per parcel. So the statute says
Per
by
parcel,
parcel.
okay.
Yes, and because these are all individual parcels as they were purchased, acquired originally, and as listed, it would be on a per parcel basis.
Okay.
And recent sales in the area suggest that it is possible that they'll come in at less than 25,000, although that's up to a formal real estate evaluation and up to a professional appraiser to determine.
And you did say that the Ardemans are gonna pay for that appraisal, is that right?
Yes, sir. That is the term of the negotiation. And again, that's pursuant to our procedure, but that's a term that I think the board and the committee should support, that when we have requests for surplus like this, that our initial approach should be that the landowner requesting the surplus pay for the appraisal.
Is that appraisal, is that gonna be just one appraisal company, or is there gonna be like 3 appraisals done, or, 3 different values there? I'm not talking about the 3 different lots, I'm talking about, is there gonna be some variation there? What I'm saying is, whose word are we gonna take, who's appraising it?
The Ardemans would be required to use a FDEP approved appraisal that are vetted and authorized. So that is in our, that's in our procedure. That's what we've communicated to them. They've agreed in principle to that, subject to the committee and the board's approval. Because of the value of these, individually certainly, but even in aggregate, we're only required to have 1 appraisal per the statute. And it's usually acquisitions that exceed $1 million where we would get a 2nd or a 3rd appraisal.
Okay.
But they're all vetted by FDEP and approved by DEP.
Madam Chair, Ms. Caitlin, do you have the acreages starting from the left of each of those tracks? Do we know the acreages of those?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'll have to pull that for you individually. They
Okay,
range
just-
from 1.9 acres to 2.4 acres, thereabouts.
Okay, that's fine.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Couple questions, Caitlin. They understand that if they do come in over 25, that they'll have to be listed.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
that has been made very clear to them, yes.
So they could have an investment in an appraisal. Second, it says that the same restrictions or similar restrictions to the deed now be conveyed. It doesn't say, is it, can you tell us what that is? Is it still allowed to build residence on it?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So the sentence I think you're referring to, Mr. Keith, is at the bottom of the second paragraph. The surplus
Right.
will include deed restrictions.
Right.
That is, it will limit development. The Ardemans have been made aware of that. And so no well, no septic, no permanent structure.
Any other questions?
Good.
What's the pleasure of the committee?
Motion to surplus property.
A second.
All right, I have a motion, and a second. Any other discussion on the matter?
I do have one question.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what we paid for originally?
What we paid for.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I don't off the top of my head. I'll have to pull that for you.
It's not a big.
It's gonna come up to about that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other questions? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. It goes forward.
All right, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, as I mentioned earlier, the next two items I have for you are for informational purposes. So there are noticing requirements associated with especially this first item that would prevent us from adopting this, one as a committee, but also even if I were presenting to the full board at this meeting. So just keep that in mind. This is an informational item that you're seeing and actually relates back in some ways to the directive issue item that we talked about during the board meeting. So the land acquisition work plan. And let me say, before I get to governance on this, the land acquisition work plan, we have worked very diligently for a extended period of time to put together what's before you today. So I want you to know that despite whatever comments and feedback that you have, that this was not done in a slingshot approach. This was not done rashly. This was not done without thought or intention, but had a lot of strategic and critical thought put into it and how staff put it together and are presenting it to you today. It was also a group project, So why am I bringing the topic of the land acquisition work plan to you today? Well, the short answer is because it's required, and it's required in two ways with slightly different terms, but and with two different names. But we're seeking to accomplish both. The first is Florida Statute 373-139, which you see listed on the top here. It is a requirement that the water management districts create an initial 5-year work plan, which was done several decades ago. We have old files of it, but that subsequent modifications or additions to that plan shall be adopted after a public hearing. So that's when I mentioned that there's a noticing requirement associated with the actual adoption of this plan. We also have to provide additional notice than the typical 7-day notice for our board meetings that Robin and Tilda and other staff help take care of. This requires a 14-day notice. It also requires us to separately notify each county commission for which we have a proposed project or a proposed acquisition. What's important to see here is that these are proposed projects or modifications. So this is not a license to purchase. This is not a here's X dollars, go forth and buy everything in this plan. This is a general guide. This is a general, here's the criteria that we want to consider as we look at lands. And that I think that's really important. This is a guidebook or an outline for the district that we need to do because it's required. We also are required every year by March 1st to submit as part of our consolidated annual report. Y'all have heard me talk about that for the 8 years I've been here. Part of that is the Florida Forever Plan, in which should include a Florida Forever work plan map. So based off of the feedback and the staff involvement, our goal is to create the 5-year land acquisition work plan and include a Florida Forever component to that, which we have and will be presenting to you today, thereby satisfying both statutory requirements. So that is the background on these plans. How did we get to where we are today? One is we started by investigating what the other agencies were doing. So we not only looked at what the other water management districts were doing, but we also looked at other agencies that have land acquisition programs like the Florida Forest Service through the Forest Legacy Program, as well as FDEP with the Florida Forever Program. We also looked at high level the FDAX program through the Rural and Family Lands, how they seek to acquire properties. We then conducted a scientific analysis and evaluated what areas of critical concern we have across our district. You see 4 listed here. That is a very brief summary of all of the data layers that have been included in our map and what we call our triage process. So when we brought those, if you remember several months ago, Mr. Chair, I brought before you the 4 properties and had y'all rank them for detailed assessment that we then took to the board. That ranking was conducted based off of criteria and data where we know that we have critical needs throughout the district. And so the 4 you see here are some of the high level 4 that we have. But again, as that scoring indicated, there are numerous other data factors that we consider when proposing a rank for a project. The next thing that we sought to do was to take a strategic approach. And this was really based off of direction given to us by this committee and by the board on what's important to the governing body of the Water Management District and what is important to helping us accomplish the 4 items mentioned above. And so what you're going to see in that work plan, what I should say is what's included in that work plan is a high priority on project sites. And when I say projects, I mean water supply and water resource development project sites, with the goal of helping to satisfy any prevention and recovery strategies that we have currently relative to the Lower Santa Fe Tuckney, what we have now, what we anticipate in the future. But we also know that we're going to have upcoming MFLs in the Upper and Middle Swanee. We know that we're going to reevaluate Madison Blue sometime soon. And so we were thinking ahead of where potential project sites would be. So I just want y'all to hear it from us that our primary focus when identifying properties was to make sure that project sites were included. And we worked with Mary's team and with Warren, which you heard his presentation last month, about specific project areas that were important and maybe slightly different than what we currently would seek for acquisition or approve for acquisition, because they may have some upland features for the rapid infiltration basin that were uplands. Again, those are solely associated with projects. We also did, and this was a big project Lorna's team undertook, and I really appreciate their critical analysis they did, is we looked at our tracks and we looked at where we potentially may have access concerns or would like better access. So think of a tract that is, Mr. Larry lives near one, a tract that's bifurcated by a natural water feature. And when we purchased the property, when the district purchased the property or exchanged for the property, access was provided, but it may have only been provided on one side of the track with that water feature going down the middle. If we have management needs on the other side, or tributary or spring or wetland, if we have management needs on the other side, getting access to it has been a challenge. And the more that Florida develops, the more those challenges are enhanced. And so we are actively working on identifying what we call permissive use agreements, which that's an agreement between us and the landowner that we can access their property. We can use their property for access. The next level, if the landowner wants something more permanent, would be an access easement, which we would come to the board to seek an access easement. And the last thing would be acquisition, and that's our least desirable option. We are really focused on permissive use agreements and access easements where we can, Mr. Chair, improve our access to property. We have timber holdings right now that we would like to get to, that are challenged to get to because access, it may have been in place through a handshake agreement 20 years ago, but as land ownership changes, people's desire for the government to come across their property certainly changes with that. The last strategic effort that we looked at when developing the work plan in front of you was for land management improvement. So this would be in alignment with, you have a tract of land and we have a 2-acre end holding. So we can't burn straight across that land. We're spending extra money to put fire lines around it. We may avoid burning it altogether because of the impacts to that infrastructure. We have a number of sites like that we would like to, over the course of time, pursue taking care of. We are not seeking to acquire structures. Let me be very clear about that. We have no interest in acquiring structures, but where the district can seek opportunities to improve its land management through corridors and through removing end holdings, that is important and that is the goal. And the last that's not up here is your general conservation areas. So that would be what we would consider that Florida Forever plan, where there are natural resource needs. That would be more in line with what the state has done with their Florida Forever program. But we really took those top 3 tiered strategic approaches. I looked at what Southwest had done, and they really kind of led the way initially on identifying those major buckets and given, again, the board's direction to focus on projects and our needs for access and land management, which you just heard the robustness of that program. That was how we got the top 3, Mr. Chair. And lastly, we looked at the technical expertise. So we have a lot of that here at the district. We're blessed with a lot of smart people and who have a lot of local knowledge and care deeply about this resource. And so we vetted this process through that land acquisition and surplus team to get before the committee today. So that's the general approach of how we landed before what you're about to see. I also have Andrew Neal here with me today, and Andrew was instrumental. Andrew is one of our GIS managers, and he was very instrumental in helping take what we gathered from the other water management districts, the other agencies, and displaying it in a way that we think is an excellent communication tool. One thing to consider as you're looking at this map is that it is for public consumption. So look at that map through the lens that it is for public consumption, and it is to be represented on behalf of the water management district. And so we kept things at a high level. We did that intentionally. The layers for projects, access, and land management, we certainly have those, but we kept it all together for the purposes of simplicity to the committee. All right, so the map, y'all have a paper map before you, and what Andrew did, which I think is fantastic to display how this map was built. Again, there was a lot of other data that was included, but for the purposes of simplicity and communication, we stuck with what we would call the first and highest, which are some of the most critical areas to the district. So we started with fee ownership. That's in green. Less than fee ownership is in the hatched. Certainly anything that we consider for access or land management, even for conservation for that matter, adjacency plays a huge role. Project areas you'll see are isolated. All right, the next thing is that when we were looking at potential is to consider what other lands are currently under conservation. So you see here in the darker peach, that's local conservation. The purple or periwinkle is in federal conservation, and then the light peach is state conservation lands. Next, we're to include the spring sheds. So that's listed here. You can see them in the somewhat amorphous blobs, but those are those are spring sheds as defined by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and you hear us talk about them a lot. They are a very important data source that we consider when conducting business of the district. Next, you have in a hatched outline the 3 basin management action plan areas. That's the Santa Fe, the Suwannee, and the Wassissa. Certainly, there are critical needs that we know in those areas when it comes to considering whether land should be protected. And those areas have, and we look at this for projects as well. So we modeled, again, land acquisition or land ownership, either in fee or less than fee, and considered some of the same things that the projects team considers. Priority focus areas, those are in the hatched coloring that you see here, or that hatched texture you could see. And then we added the Cody Escarpment, which you heard from Warren last week, the importance of the Cody Scarp relative to the placement of certain types of projects, especially rapid infiltration basins or ribs. And to get that water to perk back into the ground, you need a certain soil type, you need a certain depth to rock, and that's typically based off of the land's association with the Cody Escarpment. So that's why we include the Cody Scarp there. And you'll see that we also added, based on feedback from Warren, this is a data set that he helped define. These are these are well draining soils that have a 6-foot depth to rock that Warren is investigating with Mary's team for ideal project locations relative to the scarp. And again, these are to benefit the lower Santa Fe, Ichetucknee, MFL. Next, and before we get to our data layer, we added in the statewide Florida Forever program. I don't know how well y'all track with that program. It's a state acquisition program that in recent years has been very well funded. And quite frankly, we, for big projects, point a lot of people to because of their robustness of their funding. But we also have the benefit to have an excellent working relationship with the Division of State Lands who oversee that program. And they have welcomed projects that maybe aren't a good fit for our district and have offered to partner with us where we didn't think we may have the budget at a current time or period of time to support a project. They have offered to work with us to see what they can do as well. So that we're very thankful for that relationship. We're thankful that it's being funded at the state level and thankful that they have offered their help to us. And lastly, are the SRWMD priority acquisition areas. And those are in it depends on which view, it's purple or pink, depending on how you're viewing it. On paper, it should look more purple, but it may look pink on the screen here. And so these are the areas that I mentioned fall into those 3 main buckets that are our highest priority, as well as some conservation lands that meet the criteria for the Florida Forever program. And so this map makes up approximately 237,000 acres. Again, I don't want you to hear that number and become alarmed because this is a work plan. This is a defined set of criteria based off floodplain, based off adjacency, based on project needs, based on access, based on land management needs, that simply says these are types of lands that may be of interest to the Water Management District at some point. We do not want to own every acre on this map. We do not want to own every acre on this map in this data layer, but there may be some strategic properties that are very important, certainly for projects and certainly for access and certainly for land management. And then again, the conservation acreage, which makes up, so just hear me when I say this, the conservation acreage makes up the bulk of this. And that's when we have a private landowner come to us and say, hey, Water Management District, I would like you to purchase a conservation easement on my 500 acres, 200 acres, whatever. That data layer that is the bulk, the 220,000 or so acres, helps inform whether that property is a good fit for us to consider. And then we would go out and identify funding. And again, the board's been very clear that conservation easements on conservation lands is what and the committee as well, is what your desire is for us to consider. And obviously, as we consider project lands, access lands, and land management areas, we may be approaching, if we can purchase that in less than fee, that would be great. But there may be certain situations like in holdings where you might have a 2-acre lot parcel here or a 10-acre lot parcel there that would be better in fee ownership. So I just want you to make sure that you hear from me that that you've got the 3 primary strategic goals, and then you have our conservation layer that was put together based off of a set of criteria, and that is solely for us to triage offers as they come in. The next question, the next slide I have is about the process to adopt this work plan. Before I get to that, Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I can take questions.
Yes. Does anybody have any questions for for Caitlin at this time?
Caitlin, the kind of brownish track through, I'm sorry, can I
Go
ask a
ahead, yes.
question? The brown color that kind of tracks up, it looks like it might follow a river. What is that one? What?
Just here.
Uh-huh.
This is this is an area that is based off of data provided to us by Warren Zwanka. These are well draining soils with a depth to rock of 6 feet or less.
Madam Chair, and I would add that it's difficult to look at it at that scale, but it actually does not run congruent with the river itself. It's a distance off from the river.
Okay.
Is that to be considered a good recharge area?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This area has been specifically identified by Warren Zwanka to have potential recharge options specifically for certain types of projects. So where you've got recharge wetlands, this might not be a great idea or great area for that, but certainly where we would have what we call ribs or rapid infiltration basins, this area in association with the scarp and the river has been identified to potentially recharge water effectively, according to Warren Zwanka.
And Mr. Chair, if I may add that,
Yes.
Mr. Charles, with that, some of the considerations that our local hydrologists and geologists looked at was depth to rock, amount of essentially overburden from a percolation standpoint. Were a couple of the factors that he evaluated within there.
So this gives us a quick reference of land offers and where it falls and stuff like that.
Mr. Chair.
Can I make something very clear? If one of our committee members asks you a question, you're more than welcome to answer it. You have full reign to do what you need to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. So this map is to satisfy our statutory requirements. And again, this is a guide that we have developed. The triage that a piece of property would undergo is lengthier and more robust, but all of it is based off of the water resource criteria that y'all have that y'all have approved as part of the land acquisition directive. And again, all of these factors they are a tool to help us narrow our focus and to give you information when those lands come before you to make a choice of yay or nay. And with limited funds and increasing competitiveness and interest in this program, having a set of criteria to consider is really important.
It's good work.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Caitlin? All right, let's move on then to the next item on the agenda there. Land acquisition presentation.
Mr. Chair, one item, just to give y'all a heads up. So this work plan has to be approved by the full board. And the idea would be that based on feedback from this committee or questions that you might have or guidance, is that we would take it to the full board at the January meeting for its approval. Again, it has those noticing requirements. So you'll see, you may hear from some of your county commissioners about what this plan is. We'll certainly prepare talking points so that you're well suited to answer those questions from any county officials that you have, because we will be specifically reaching out to them probably by email, in addition to the 14-day noticing requirement, which goes into the newspapers. But I just wanted y'all to know that we have to do that. We would require to do it in January. We also will adopt the Florida Forever plan, which is a layer within this work plan, ideally at the February meeting, although we could also do it in January. It depends on how we get those materials pulled together. And then the Florida Forever plan is included in the March 1st transmittal to DEP, the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, Governor, Secretary, a slew of other folks. So that was just an important note.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I have another item for you to consider today, and this is regarding our overall procedures when it comes to lands transactions. And we've done a lot of research on these. We are willing to entertain a whole host of ideas from the committee and how y'all want to advance forward. As a reminder, this is an informational item to gather feedback from you. This is not action you are taking this month. We would likely, based off of, depending on your feedback, we would likely bring back an updated directive to clarify some of these things in January or February, as well as a memorandum to codify it depending on how we move forward. The impetus of this has been looking at the governance associated with lands transaction, and it's robust. So the Florida statutes that you see listed on the left here are a snapshot of it's a comprehensive list. But I was reading one yesterday relative to the budget that I had learned about transactions, Tim, in the narrative over 10 million and 50 million. And I thought, well, luckily we don't buy a lot of $10 million properties, so that doesn't apply to us. But the rules governing lands transactions are many and they're robust, and I think they're good. They provide good guidance. They help protect the interests of taxpayers, and they keep folks from getting squirrely when it comes to buying land. So Florida statutes listed there. The district, as Lorna mentioned, we also have Florida Administrative Code 40B9 that not only outlines land management activities, but also land acquisition activities. We have governing board directives, both of which y'all updated this 2024, this fiscal year, which we're this calendar year, which we're thankful for. And you took away the only other one that was the one we repealed earlier. We also rely heavily on legal opinions because getting land transactions wrong comes with a hefty price and not great consequences. So Tommy has been a tremendous mentor and value to me. Our legal bill this fiscal year is likely going to be high because I need his help a lot. And he's a great resource. So
That's a good thing though, Katie, because he didn't have a report earlier. So I just want to make sure we're getting our money's worth out of him. So that's good.
we are.
Okay.
We are.
Excellent.
He would
Yes, sir.
tell
I'm
you
sure.
I drive a hard bargain. Tommy would tell you I drive a hard bargain with, he would tell you that. And procedures. So we also have procedures, which we are asking you to weigh in on today. So whereas you may not, a committee or a board may not typically weigh in on staff procedures, given the interest of lands transactions from our committee and from our board, we thought it prudent and appropriate to bring these before the committee today. So what is the goal of even bringing this before you? Well, we have brought some access easements to the board relative to DOT, if y'all remember, for bridge repair. And Mr. Larry Kay looked me dead in the face in that meeting and said, Caitlin, is there any way we can reduce the administrative burden of these access easements? And I said, I would look at it. Yes, sir, I would look at it. Mr. Schwab, Chair Schwab, you have been very clear in your desire to reduce bureaucracy and redundancy in government and maximize the benefit of the taxpayer dollars, as well as not buy property that we do not need and not increase our land holdings in areas that we do not need. So and y'all have all had, I've heard from all of you relative to your land interests, and they all, to some degree, align with this. So this was the big picture goal of what we're trying to do here. And again, you're going to hear me talk about that project development, access, and improved land management as our primary goals for land acquisition moving forward, at least for the foreseeable future, because we have a lot of work to do there. So what does that potentially mean under the umbrella of that goal? Well, this is our current procedure at a very high level. When an application comes in, there's even a desktop staff review that occurs that April Olive, who is here, she helps triage our acquisition offers as they come in, which is a tremendous support to me. And so there's work even that occurs after that initial application phase. So if you think about when permits come in and we do requests for additional information or RAIs, I've heard permittees talk about those. We may have those where they didn't submit the map or they didn't provide the appropriate criteria for it to be considered a bona fide offer. Bona fide offer is defined in our rule, so we make sure it at least satisfies the rule. Once all of that information is satisfied, the offer goes to the land acquisition and surplus team. So this is a group that reviews our land offers. This could be exchanges, requests for surplus like the one that you had today, acquisitions, leases, easements, anything. Goes to this land acquisition and surplus team. Then, depending on the review, there's a step 2B here. It gets, discuss these with Hugh. These conversations do not happen in a vacuum, and we often talk about them at D5. which is our executive leadership team meeting, but they're certainly vetted internally. Then we would go to the Lands Committee and have a request for negotiations, which is what I did today. After that, it would go to the board for a request for negotiations. Then due diligence would occur. So I haven't even talked price. I haven't even talked price with people at this point. Then it would go back to the Lands Committee for the offer approval and resolution, and then back to the board for the offer committee to the resolution, and then we would close. And sometimes the resolution happens after closing. Sometimes it's offered in the order you see here, so there may be additional steps. But the length of transaction, it seems like, is 18 to 24 months or more. And certainly those of you who have been with the district for some period of time, y'all likely have experienced this and remembered this. You may have gotten calls about the length of time associated with our transactions. We do not want to do things in a rushed manner, but we do want to be as efficient as possible. So based off of the feedback from the board on how we can be efficient and consider paths to move forward, I looked at our rule and I looked at the statute relative to land acquisitions procedures. And currently we have a Lands Committee, of which I'm presenting to right now. But the Lands Committee authorizations are really only given to the board. So the full board is required to conduct lands transactions. And the Lands Committee can provide guidance, they can provide input, but the board is the full board is the only authority to be able to give on lands transactions. That's surplus, that's any interest in land, even access easements. Because I called Tommy, I said, Tommy, I really would like it for my Lands Committee to be able to approve access easements, or even the executive director to have it delegated. He said, that's a great idea, but you can't do it because the statute requires that all interest in land be approved by the board, the full board. So after that, I went and talked to the other water management districts and asked how they handle things, and got their feedback, which is what's going to guide what I propose to you today. So with all those things considered, my recommendation for you to consider is that we would begin taking our lands transactions to the full committee, to the full board, not to the full committee. That we would, because of the requirement of the full board to act on lands transactions, is that we would take it directly to the full board. And that would be consistent with several of the other water management districts as well. When we're looking at consistency, there's also an opportunity for consistency that y'all would not, even the board, have to authorize a request for negotiations. That is not statutorily required. Staff can conduct negotiations with a landowner to gather and get to an offer price that they then take to the board for approval. This is a step that was added some years ago. This was added some years ago. So the statute does not require, the things that I removed here are things that are not required for statute, in an attempt to be responsive to feedback from the board and try to be as efficient with time and dollars as possible. So I realize that this is probably a lot for some of y'all to consider hearing this for the first time. But again, I wanted to honor the process and be responsive to your request.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
question. When we eliminate all these steps, how do you get to due diligence?
So we would start with due diligence. So an offer comes in. If we were going to be consistent with the other water management districts, we would we would define the terms of on a conservation easement, or say the surplus, and we would do the appraisal and get to offer price, which is similar to how you would buy like a residential property.
I get it, but that also gets involved in expense. And the whole reason we have a lands committee is to vet and see if we even want to enter into expense. If we eliminate those steps, it only goes to the governing board after it's all done, and do we accept it or not?
Yes, sir. That's certainly a consideration. I think when we're looking at, again, when I'm looking at consistency, I'm looking at expense, what we're finding is that The expense is really founded in the appraisal. There's no other expense that I can think of that we would conduct other than a significant amount of staff time going through these other steps. But the appraisal is the cost that we would do ahead of time. And so far, those have been less than $5,000. And what I'm finding and what we're seeing is that when we conduct these steps in this way, we got a lot of offers that come in where people are it seems like we're getting a lot of fishing where the board, people are coming in with offers, the board approves us to come to negotiate. And because we're not talking price till much later in the game, everybody's got a price in mind. Everybody knows what they want for their land, whether it's a lot or a little. And waiting to talk price so far into the transaction, I think we're actually wasting, I think we could improve our expenditure of appraisal dollars if we talked price earlier on.
Well, but you could do that in your application.
Which we do.
Still come to the lands committee to see if it's something we deem worthy of the board. I got a problem with number 3. 4 and 6 I can understand. I'm not sure about 3.
I have a question about that same aspect of it. How much time, Caitlin, are you thinking if you just eliminate steps 3, 4, and 6, are you going to shave off the 18 to 24 months? Is it just 3 months?
No, sir. And that's a great question, and that's a fair question. It's the preparation that goes into putting the deals together and the waiting and the back and forth with these landowners. I think, and again, the goal is not to be rushed. I don't want a lesser time frame to communicate a desire to be rushed. I do think that these transactions taken as long as they do, people, they jump in and out, they're selling, then they're not selling, the terms change over time. But I do think we could shave off a significant amount of time, especially if we start talking price early on, which we need to do.
Well, you can't do that like what Mr. Keith said in the application process?
We can, and that is, if I jump to the next slide, I included that, say we took out the lands committee and took things straight to the board. One option is that the board could still approve the request to negotiate, which, they could do, and that's listed in yellow here.
Well, back the slide up one more time. Let me ask you a question. Why can't, to save a month's time, 2 months' time, why can't you have the lands committee on board meeting day at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then have your board meeting at 9 and amend your agenda to reflect what the committee just passed?
If that's the will of the board and of the board chair, we can certainly do that. I think the goal here was to look at opportunities where we could streamline the process. And again, I think if that's the will of the committee and of the board, we'll certainly do that. We can certainly do that.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I had a similar concern because if you just skip straight to the board, you may end up getting something tabled to the next meeting because of,
absolutely,
trying to do your own research. So I like that idea, is having a lands committee prior to the meeting. I hadn't thought of that till you brought it up, but I like it because I think going the other way, you'd end up having a lot of things tabled to the next meeting for research.
Yeah, but you're not going to get it solved between.
No, you're not.
And that time between the 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock.
But the committee can always move to put it on the agenda or not. But the other issue is like what was just said, is the process of application and land acquisition and everything else. If you recall that tract in Jefferson County on the Osceola River that we resoundingly rejected, that we didn't want to buy. And it was presented to us that it had springs on it and it had a whole bunch of other stuff on it, and it just wasn't something that we wanted to do. And it took time to do that. It took trips out there to go look at it. It took board members time to go put their feet on the ground out there. And, you know, when it comes to buying land, and you stated very clearly and very well my position on most of that. Very well, by the way, you know me pretty good. But the point of it is it takes time to really evaluate if it's really in the interest of the district. And I find myself, not that I have no distrust of the staff or any person that works at this district on a daily basis. But a lot of times, people that work all the time here have a viewpoint and a vision, and it's not in line with a lot of times with what how the board sees it. And it's just a difference of perspective. It's not right or wrong. It's just a difference in perspective. And it takes time, and it seems like there's some redundancies there, but it takes time to be able to gain that perspective, or one way or the other. So, I'm not saying no, but I'm just, what's going on in my mind? As big of a circus as it is.
But, Mr. Chair, this proposal here just, in essence, does away with the land committee.
Mm-hmm.
Done.
Can I?
Yes, ma'am.
If we do 1 and 2, and instead of the governing board, but land committee to request negotiations, no, go back to your other one.
Forward.
Yep.
This one.
Yep. And then instead of governing board in orange, you put the lands committee unless the governing board has to do the requesting. Because once the lands committee can say, okay, we kind of like it, go ahead and do negotiations. Then when you come before the board, you got your price, all that sort of stuff. It'd be nice for the lands committee to have some sort of idea, which the landowner could put on their application, what the price, what they're thinking. But that would give the lands committee an opportunity to request negotiations, and then it would just come back to the governing board.
Yeah, I certainly agree with gathering more information before it even comes to the lands committee, that we have a full package application. If they can't answer those questions, then it just doesn't come to the lands committee.
Can I jump in?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
One of the issues is that makes it a little different than when you're trying to negotiate between two private parties. Is two private parties have the ability to shake hands and say, this is the price. We don't really have that ability. So when you say negotiate before you get the appraisal, it's not, you don't really negotiate very well before you get the appraisal, because we don't really know what we can pay. The private landowner's in the position of, they don't want to lowball themselves because they don't want to ask for less than the appraised value. So if you compel the landowner and say, well, you have to give us a purchase price, well, they're going to give you a very, very high price, thinking, well, we'll, whatever the appraisal, that way we know we're not lowballing it and we'll just get what the appraisal is. I think one of the things that might speed the process a little bit to help and maybe make a lands committee and a governing board meeting more productive would be to move that decision as to the workup to staff, to the executive director, because then when it got to you all, there would be an appraisal, and that appraisal would give a dollar figure, and then you'd be able to go ahead and make your decision. Until you get the appraisal, everybody's just saying, we're going to all try to do what's right. There's no, we are going to take this amount and we are going to pay this amount. And that's what a real estate deal is all about, the money. I mean, you got to have the money worked out.
Mr. Chair, one of the things that I would offer to that is our application form or land offer form actually does ask for the asking price on there. That is rarely completed. With the request from the offerer to see what the appraisal.
And we can force them to do that.
It doesn't have to be an exact number. They can say, we agree to accept 90% of the appraised value or something.
Yes, sir.
Give us something to start with.
Yeah. But, and we can force them to put a number in there, but I'm just telling you that number's going to be high.
Like I said, it doesn't have to be a number,
Yeah.
but we have to have something. I mean, if we spend the money to do all this and they say, oh, no, I want twice that.
And
The other thing, just to maybe give a little perspective, when I started in 2011 with the district, the process, as I remember it, was staff did the whole thing from beginning to end, brought it to the board one time, the board approved it. And so the reaction from the board was exactly what you guys are talking about. They're like, no, we want to slow this process down because the district was, in their opinion at that time, was buying a whole lot of property and they weren't sure that we actually needed all the property and yada, yada. Today, we're buying far fewer pieces of property. I mean, we have significantly slowed down that purchase of property. I mean, you got to remember before, in those days, in the decade or 2 decades before that, that's when they bought RO Ranch. That's when they, did all these things, and they were kind of, the thought from the governing board was that staff had to be reined in. It's a much different, it's much different now. And you may want to consider it, the pendulum swinging back a little bit and loosening up on that to get a little more efficient system. The problem with what the governing board did back then was that, and I think Kaylin said this, when you've got these time periods of 2 years, the property owner many times has just moved on at that point. And so you've got to, you want to have the right amount of checks and balances and the governing board inserting themselves into that, but it can't take 2 years. It just, the only properties you're going to have there then are going to be properties nobody else will buy.
I mean, can we do something like have the property offer, the person offering the property pay for the appraisal? And if then if we end up going ahead and go through with the purchase, then we could reimburse the appraisal amount. But if we're saying no, we're not going to do that, then they've just lost out the buying of an appraisal. But that gets off of the district. We're paying for a bunch of appraisals for stuff we don't want.
I didn't follow that exactly.
Okay.
So the property owner pays for the appraisal.
Up front.
Up front. They present it to us. If we buy it, then we reimburse the appraisal. If we don't buy it, we don't reimburse.
Correct. Correct.
That is certainly within your discretion to set up a system like that. You're going to have far fewer offers if every offer has to be accompanied by an appraisal. But yes, that is within your discretion.
But that would take care of your concern.
I think where we have conservation properties that don't serve a project access or land management need, that is certainly something to consider. You may see an additional request from staff eventually where we ask that you implement some type of monetary fee for applications for conservation lands that are not associated with projects access or management. I think where you've got projects where we may be seeking ownership, where we may be approaching a landowner, or an in-holding where we may approach the landowner, or where there's access, I don't know if you would want to force them to pay the appraisal if we're seeking that transaction. So I would think that that would need to be a consideration. I wouldn't want to go to somebody and say, hey, we want to buy your land. It's important to us, but you also need to pay for the appraisal.
It'd be.
Well, that could be, Chair. I do believe that either way, the earlier the appraisal gets into the whole equation, the quicker you can get through the negotiation and everything else. I mean, everybody wants to know the price, and the earlier you develop that or get that information with the appraisal. So if we move the appraisal up in the process, I think you're going to save time also doing it that way. No matter who pays for the appraisal, I think it needs to be moved forward in the process or move closer to the top of the list.
Mr. Crab, I believe we could structure it such that to Caitlin's point, if the district is seeking a particular piece of property, then the district would bear the cost of an appraisal. However, if that property had an offer on property during the course of this board meeting, if someone was offering us property, then that burden is on the offerer at that point.
That's probably a better way of doing it, is the offerer pays the appraisal, whether us or them.
Caitlin, let me ask you another question. The land acquisition and surplus team, that's just made up of staff members, is that right?
Sir.
How often does that team meet?
We meet, we meet monthly or more frequently than monthly, especially in light of putting together the work plan that y'all just reviewed and discussing some potential procedures. We have one scheduled for Thursday. As of Monday, I had no intentions of meeting because there were no offers. However, we've gotten 3 offers in less than 24 hours. And so we will have to meet. That is, sorry.
No, so the question is then to be able to do the best of both worlds, to speed this thing up, to maybe change up when the Lands Committee meets, is how hard would it be in step 2 there to include the Lands Committee in your surplus team meetings? That way you have staff and you have board members that want to be on that committee. Maybe, and I'm not asking you to meet on board meeting day. I'm just saying if you want to meet every second Thursday of the month, maybe the committee needs to come back over here on Thursday and have an hour-long or 2-hour meeting with.
It'd still have to be advertised.
Right. Can I?
If you include us in it.
The one issue there and is that when the Lands Committee is discussing it and when the Lands team is discussing it and all of that, they have a certain freedom because it's not a public meeting and they can say, this is good, this is bad, this is nonsense, this is all of that. You're not going to have that if governing board members and the Lands Committee are also there. I think though, if you wanted to do that, what you could do is you could have the staff meet, like say from noon to 2, and then you could have a Lands Committee meeting like from 2 to 3 or something, if you wanted to like speed the process and hook.
But that's what I'm trying to say is speed the process up, but also get the best of both worlds where you're having a collaboration, kind of what we do now.
Or you could have,
Give you the
you
freedom
could
to
have
choose when the
one
Lands
board
Committee-
member attend their meeting.
Do what now?
You could have one board
member, that's right.
have the chair attend their meeting.
Or a designated representative. Or
As long as there's not more than one of us there.
Right.
That's right.
You have a member of the chair couldn't make it, maybe somebody else.
Or somebody, yeah.
Designee.
I'm just throwing some ideas out to try to.
The general concept is not to wait a month for the Lands Committee to meet.
100%.
Right.
So if you meet your meeting next week and then you want to follow up the Lands Committee the following week, and we can meet on phone, can we not?
Well, you can, but remember, governing board isn't like a county commission or a city commission. You can't just post an ad and a couple of days later have a special meeting. So what you would have to, we can do
It's
it
not a
with,
governing board, it's a Lands Committee.
it doesn't matter. What you can do though is you can, if you, we can work on a system where we go ahead and notice meetings all through the year. Because remember, they have to be noticed in the paper. You got how many counties? 7,
13.
15 counties, something like that, that has to be noticed, all of that. So we can do it, but we can't just immediately say, yeah, we're going to do it next week, is my point.
So in January, you notice all the proposed meetings, but then you can come back and cancel if you don't have a need.
That's right. You don't have to do all the noticing to cancel a meeting once it's noticed.
In your professional opinion, Caitlin, what about a system like that right there? I mean, I'm just thinking outside the box where you still have a little bit of give and take, you have a little bit of board input to what we're trying to do. Because again, I think if you could start early in on the surplus team, and you know that the board or the committee's just not going to go for it, then we're not wasting time.
So I will answer that 2 ways. In the most recent directive that you approved, you authorized the executive director to issue denials on offers, and then obviously the person can come and appeal that to the board if they want to, if they don't like the staff's decision. So that has been tremendous and has helped. So when we get a 2-acre parcel that is not near anything, that's not floodplain, that has no benefit to the district, we just had one of those, staff can make the recommendation to Hugh to say, will you please deny this? It doesn't meet any of these criteria. And he can do that. And if that person wants to appeal to the board, they can. So that has been tremendous. And I will say that has been a process improvement. I think if the board at this point, or the Lands Committee, slash board, since all of y'all are here and Ms. Johns is weighing in, would like to see the properties that staff are interested in. I think that we should bring them to you for the request to negotiate. And then my recommendation would be that over the course of the next 6 months to a year, you see the types of properties that we're bringing. You can start to see the perspective, as you mentioned, of staff. I agree with you, has historically been, may still be to some degree different than what the board's looking at. And if at some point you say, hey, staff's got it, they're in line with what we're interested in, then, you know, you could remove that step where staff go directly to appraisal. But I think that if it goes directly to the board, y'all can still have the discussions that you want to freely. You still see everything that you want to see ahead of time before any, besides staff time, costs are incurred. And that would still allow us to move at a relatively efficient pace. It would allow us to move at a relatively efficient pace, and then anything you approve for appraisals, we could do. You'll probably see staff bringing you things where we say, historically, we may have offered this up for due diligence, but because of this focus on project lands, access, and land management, we have the other thing is that we're very limited by budget. So and which I haven't mentioned, but I'm viewing this from, I can't do a lot of appraisals because I don't have a big budget. So we're being really selective, and we're going to have to be even more selective moving forward because we've got this projects that we have got to put water back in the ground for the Lower San Fayette Tuckney. And we've got to figure out some access issues that, you know, were decisions made by previous staff and board. So I am very appreciative of the sensitivity around lands because I see it on the land management side. I see the burden that previous decisions have caused and the benefit. So in my professional opinion, my recommendation would be, let me bring you those requests on the front end. And if y'all like them, you can approve them for appraisals. If they're not a good fit, they can be declined at the board level. If you want to add the step with the lands committee, we certainly can. I just think given that everybody but the chair is already on the lands committee, that everybody on the board except the chair is already on the lands committee, I could take it directly to the board. But if you want to keep the lands committee, I will happily submit to that.
Well, again, we're not making decisions today.
Sure.
You've given us something to think about, and knowing some of the temperaments and the personalities of our prestigious board here, it takes us a little while to chew on it.
Understood.
To contemplate where we're at, especially the chair here. And I told on another conversation that I had with the executive director that it's not about a power thing or position. It's the fact of trying to make sure that what the staff wants as far as the land acquisition surplus team and the direction that the staff wants to go in is in coherence to what the board, their vision is. And that takes some work, and sometimes it takes some discussion and time to bring everybody together. It's not a disagreement. It's just a different viewpoint. And it's not a right or wrong issue at all. And it's not for me personally, it's not a power issue. It's not a control issue. It's just what's the best thing to do.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair,
I certainly want to follow the will of the committee and the board.
would you feel more comfortable instead of in the orange to put lands committee instead of governing board? And that way you've got that. It's not a second step for the governing board. Just go ahead and put in lands committee and do the request for negotiations. And then all the other stuff will happen. Then it'll trickle down to the governing board.
But could the lands committee instead of the governing board in step 3 give that request, or does it have to be board approved? Number 3, can the committee make the recommendation there, the request for negotiations, or does the board have to do it?
I think y'all can set it up either way. Remember, your executive director right now has spending authority up to whatever. I mean, so if you want to view that as a lands committee and then the governing board, but I mean, I'm kind of like Caitlin on that. We say, oh, well, now we got the lands committee. Well, that's everybody. I mean, is there a reason to have something called a lands committee when it's the whole board?
Except me.
Well, but you're here. I mean,
Yes, I am, right.
you know, okay, but he's here too. I mean,
Yeah, I agree. Yes, absolutely. And we all have, I think every board member has a keen sense on land acquisition. So
and that's another thing that's evolved. You know, when we first started the lands committee, it was it was maybe 3 board members or 4 board members, but everybody's interested in land. And so board members kept showing up and staying and participating, and then now it's the whole board, you know?
I think that's good, Mr. Chair. I think
Yeah, yeah.
having the full board from the beginning, or a large lands committee, however you want to view it, is important when we're considering acquisitions due to the interest, due to the competitiveness, and due to the limited availability of funds. Having as many of the board members, if not the full board, involved in those discussions early on, I think is important.
Well, Caitlin, if you can, you know, historical perspective is very important. And I know that you mentioned it
Yes, sir.
back in the early 2000s when the Florida Forever Fund was really kicking it and we were buying a lot of land. I get that. But again, historical perspective goes back, I don't know how long Virginia's been here, but for me, it's almost 10 years now. Okay. That's in light of how long the district's been here, or when we started committees and done a lot of things, especially with Florida Forever Funds and why the bonanza of buying 100 and some odd thousand acres of land. And then we're finding ourselves wanting to surplus some and not this. And then we're having road maintenance issues and chopping issues and budgets on everything, because the price of buying land is not just buying land, it's managing it.
Yes, sir.
Right? Making sure the resource is well taken care of. But all that being said I want a better historical perspective.
Sure.
Okay, I'm not talking about today. I want it in writing. I want something that I can read and chew and think about.
Yes, sir.
All right,
It's going to be short, but I'll be happy to.
yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
You know, it's important to get that historical perspective where we can analyze that, because there's a lot to the story, not just what's happening here, but what are the outside pressures? Why are we getting millions upon millions of dollars influxed into the state to go buy land? I mean, I'm looking at a map here. I see a lot of governmental ownership on this map. And you're telling me that we need to go buy more land for projects that we want, that we have to do because of minimum flows and levels? We can't go partner with somebody that already owns land here? You're telling me that? I mean, I'm serious.
No, I would agree with you that, and we are looking at that from a project status aspect, is that we are looking at partnering with some of our sister agencies, other governmental agencies, and some of our counties even, to that point, to the extent that it's available.
I'm not talking about, I'm talking about going to DOF. I mean, how many thousands of acres do they own of state forest in our area or all over the state?
For $1 million.
Yeah, 1 million acres of land.
In the feds.
And we want more? We want to take more off the tax rolls?
One final thought on this, and I'm going to say that in my mind, there's not an appraiser or a person in the state of Florida that understands the value of this land better than our staff should. We have bought more land, we've sold more land. We understand, like what Chair was saying, that land has different values. It has values to who's looking at it. We have conservation value in mind. So as far as, we have a general idea of what that land is worth, or we should have, when it's proposed, just by location and our past history.
Or even project
So
value.
We could speed up some of that stuff. Yeah, I think this can be streamlined. Just, I'm hesitant to relinquish the committee just on what I've heard today.
Well, and like I said, step 3 could be the committee.
Could be. Look,
And that way we're not adding it and I mean, it's gonna be during a probably, unless we have a committee meeting separate from governing board day to speed up the
yeah, 'cause
process,
this,
but
actually, that is, number 4 on the other list, just got brought up to number 3 on this list.
the
Where it
earlier.
was crossed out on the other list, it just got moved to this list. And I agree, we have almost a full board. My other thought was, since we have probably a quorum of the board on the lands committee, does that give us authority?
Yeah, you are free to set it up that way. Yes, sir. So,
There's a lot of things we've talked.
what we've, the only thing that would stop, you right now from making decisions is that the meeting that we're noticed for right now is a lands committee meeting, not a full governing board meeting.
Sure.
But yeah, if you guys wanted to notice this as a special meeting, you would have the authority to vote and approve and do anything you could otherwise, because you've got the whole board except for one, who was out.
Any other comments?
No.
Questions? Thank you very, very much. I appreciate you. Any other announcements then that we have? Okay, come on, Miss Caitlin.
So, and similar for acquisition, the request would be that when we have a desire for surplus, that it would go directly to the board because it requires board authority. So, versus an administrative request to the full board. So the request for surplus that you did today has to go to the full board. So I'm very clear on the lands committee. I think there's a lot of options for us to move forward relative to acquisitions. If y'all would like to see them as they come in before we go to appraisals, we can certainly bring those either before the full board or before the lands committee. And we can continue to move forward. That's for the surplus process. Other procedural things that we'd like y'all to consider, given many of the topics that we talked about today. We have no full-time dedicated staff to acquisition or surplus. That's an important thing to remember. That's very different than the other water management districts. Every single one of them have a full-time acquisition person and surplus access easements, because it's not just acquisition. So we are doing this as part of other duties. And again, in an effort to be strategic, focusing our district funds on project areas, access, and critical land management. Mr. Schwab, I hear your comments about project lands. We are certainly evaluating that. I can promise you, having acquisition associated closely with land management, we do not want to own things that do not have a clear purpose. We are not looking to increase our management burden unless it solves a critical water management district need. And when I say critical, I mean very critical, because every piece of dirt that we buy is an added acre of responsibility to that team that you saw.
Absolutely.
And I'm very considerate of their time. They have almost reached their capacity on acres per person. So that I want you to know that is one of my utmost concerns when it comes to that team, and certainly have other concerns for other programs. So that has been a good move, bringing acquisition in with land management, and I think it should always be that way moving forward. But we have limited funds. Once our district acquisition funds are expended, unless we surplus it, get grant funding, or the board directs us to pull money from another pot, there is no more acquisition funds. So there is not an unending pot of land acquisition money available. And that is of a huge concern when we do know that there are some projects we're going to have to do, Mr. Schwab, that we can't do on our property or somebody else's, but we know that, hey, if we put this project in the ground, that's going to relieve a regulatory burden on a permittee. The district can pay for this project and put it in the ground, and so may not have to reduce their water use as significantly. So projects, we're honed in on those. Like I said, access, we can get to timber resources we don't currently have. So keeping that pot of money, a district money for our land acquisition, focused on those top 3 areas is a pretty major focus of your staff with the executive director and the executive leadership team in unison on that. So our request for you to consider is that as we receive requests for conservation easements and other non-critical acquisitions. So everything that doesn't fall into that top bullet, that number one bullet, that we would identify grant funds for those. So just to paint a picture, and again, we're in negotiations. So we're just in general, think about the price of land per acre, depending on where you are. Alachua County, Gilchrist County, Northern Levy County. At a price per acre, if you buy 1,000 acres, you're in millions. You're in 7 digits potential. You're not in hundreds of thousands anymore. We don't have a budget to support 1,000-acre purchases, fee or less than fee, over and over and over and over again. But I promise you, we have needs in that top bullet that we're going to have to start clipping away at over time so that we can do the work that y'all have charged us to do in some form or fashion, right? Fee, less than fee, cooperative agreements. It's going to cost money in some way. So that's something that we would like y'all to consider, is that we move those conservation easement projects and other non-critical acquisitions. We would still take them. We would still consider them. We don't want to turn people away, but that we would identify grant funding for those. Very similar to how y'all consider Springs projects and alternative water supply projects from Leroy when those come to you. Another thing for you to consider, and this is something to kind of codify a current practice, but when I talk to other agencies and look at some of the challenges that they face, it might be worth adding to our directive, is that any exchange we have would be a 2-to-1 benefit. And again, we have put that into place in practice, but we don't have it written down anywhere. Or if it doesn't provide a 2-to-1 benefit, that there's some critical project need, access need, land management need that it would satisfy. So again, we get a lot of requests of come by my 2 acres, come by my 5 acres, come by my 80 acres, come by my 100 acres, come by my 200 acres. And we triage those at the staff level. And currently with the ability to decline those, or they withdraw based on our interest. But again, given development pressure, there's a lot of heat on this land management program or land acquisition program, because people want land. They either want ours or they want to sell us theirs and keep the fee, which is great when you have $100 million like the state of Florida at DEP. When you have limited budget at the Water Management District, we need to be more strategic and thoughtful. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Any questions for Kayla? Wonderful, thank you very much. Any announcements that we have?
Yes, sir.
I would entertain a motion then to adjourn the meeting.
Adjourn.
I have a motion. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. Good discussion.